pretty much are good to go. How you doing, Thomas? How you been, man?
Doing good. Really busy with a lot of the stuff that we're working on.
Sure.
But yeah, let's get into that today. It's gonna be fun.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Actually, GHAZZY, we'll do the intro real quick, and then I'll start the segue. Go for it, bud.
I like it. All right, welcome everybody to the Tavern Talk. Still have no idea what episode we're on, and we've had a little bit of a mini break, but we are back and brought in no one else but Thomas Marlott, CEO of the Moon game. It's not the Moon Beast game, because that's another game. We're going to talk about No Rest for the Wicked, which has been a very interesting ride to try out, and obviously with me, my co-host, Darth Microtransaction. But welcome in, Thomas. How are you doing?
Doing good. How
Well,
are you guys doing?
Doing good. We both recently played your recent update. The multiplayer update seemed like pretty well received. I mean, I played it both with Riker and then we tried hardcore in the difficult mode with Karn. So I kind of did two run-throughs of the multiplayer.
I saw your playthrough with Riker. It was very enjoyable.
That was a good time. It's been a minute since I got a chance to play with Riker, but that was actually... It's surprising
You had
how...
a lot of arrows in your back, but it was very
yes,
enjoyable.
yes. Friendly fire is real. Thank God the damage was reduced, because Riker would have had quite a kill count on me, I think. But I was surprised how smooth the multiplayer actually was. I don't think we had like any disconnects or any issues or anything like that. So would you say the multiplayer has been mostly a successful launch?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was shitting my pants about, right? Because historically, if you look at multiple launches, you never, know what you're going to get, right? Because you have to kind of like make all these decisions at the start, like how many servers do we put up? Can we auto scale those servers, right? Like, do we hit the right number, or is it all going to error 37, right? And yeah, we went into it pretty confident. Because we already knew, hey, breach refined, we left the game in a pretty good state, but then we kept polishing, right? Meanwhile, our tech team also did a ton of work on just the multiplayer aspect. We tested everything thoroughly. Then we did the beta. There were some systems which we can actually talk about here, right? Because like last time, Darth, when I talked to you, we went pretty hardcore into it, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. I always like when I have these interviews with streamers that actually really play the games, right? Where it's not just some journalistic outlet where it's clear that, hey, this person hasn't even played my game. But yeah, there were some systems where we tried to limit players and people give us a tremendous amount of shit, right? Yeah. Then over the Christmas holidays, I just changed those systems and came up with kind of like the Ember system that we have right now, and like more and more stuff, right? And like we ended up, I think, in a really nice spot. And then we released the game and it just fucking blew off the handle, right? Like it was just insane. Like there were days when we sold started with oh my God, we sold 30,000 copies on day one, and then it went to 50, and then it went to 70, and it kept going, and it's just we were over our graders and all this stuff, right? So I'm in a very good mood, thinking that, hey, once we fully release and we have all the stuff in there that we're still planning, it should be quite a remarkable experience for everybody.
Yeah, speaking of selling a lot of copies, I mean, on the actual original release, it was 36,276, I think was the peak, and then this multiplayer together update was 62,997. So I mean, pretty close to 2x from the original. What do you attribute that sort of baseline growth to? Because I mean, having a new peak over the top of like the original release is like kind of hard to do for games.
That's actually what I wanted to ask you, right? I just recently had this conversation with Thomas Brush, and we basically did a fairly simple strategy, right? We just polished the crap out of the game and made sure that, hey, it's really fun for us to play. And then Apurva in our marketing team came up with this whole thing of guys, obviously, we don't really have a quality problem here. We have an attention problem, right? Like, so many people just haven't heard of Wicked yet and so on, right? And she attacked it in two ways, right? She did the whole thing with hey, we should do a 40% discount, which is rough, right? But she was make it as easy as possible for people to just try the game, right? And then on top of that, we also did the free weekend, right? And out of the two, actually, I think the free weekend did more for us than the discount, because the conversion rate that we saw was fucking through the roof, right? Like it's just way higher than what you'd normally see.
Are you willing to share that number by any chance? Because I'm curious, actually, what is the conversion rate of people that tried the game for free that became product owners?
It was almost half.
Oh, that okay. So that almost, is, yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah,
that's actually
fucking wild. Insane. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, almost every second person who tried it, right, was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna buy that game now," right? And the nice thing is, because it was co-op, right, they didn't just buy one copy; they often bought 4 copies. So that was a sweet side effect. But I wanted to ask you guys, because it is historically difficult, right? Like if you have a launch, right? Like usually your initial launch is the biggest it ever gets, right? But not in early access, right? But it is usually the thing where you see a ton of sales and then you see that 1.0, right? Obviously here it was multiplayer, but what do you guys think did the trick?
Guys, you want to go first or should I?
Yeah, you can go for it.
So, okay. So the way I see it, and you're welcome to disagree, but the way I see it, looking back at my own previous experience, was what happened with No Rest for the Wicked the first time I played it. It wasn't that I didn't want to play it. It was that there was something I ran into that like turned me off about the game. Like for instance, originally there was like a time gating aspect of the game and material acquisition were both like kind of annoying things, and they hit you fairly early into the game, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So when I was playing the game, I ran into that and then was kind of like, that's kind of like a buzzkill a little bit for me. And then if you push through, you actually end the game like fairly early. You go through, you hit the last boss, and you're kind of like done with the game. So I feel like your audience retention number is like fairly quick, so that the people that are playing the game, the word of mouth, I didn't feel like was spreading as much because you're kind of done with the game soon, and there's a couple things that would turn you off early. So the recommendation amount would be kind of hard. And then you go to this release where it's multiplayer. You guys have more content available, so you can actually have a longevity of playthrough. You don't have as much of the annoying like time gating type of stuff. Now it's like pretty fast, and material acquisition has been improved. Crafting is a little bit better, etc. So I feel like there's more to keep you on long enough to actually go out and recommend it to a friend, plus the sell. And then if you have a buddy you actually want to play it with, I feel like the multiplayer is like obviously kind of accounts for itself there. But that's what I would see for myself, like playing this. I remember hitting the points where I was kind of like, this is kind of making me not want to play. And I never really hit that with the update in particular. I was just kind of like, this is actually really fun. And the multiplayer actually like was very enjoyable. Like I had easily twice as much fun playing with a buddy than playing solo.
I'm sure we'll talk about this as well, right? The whole multiplayer, the way we approach it and so on. GHAZZY, what's your thinking on this?
So I have a very different approach to it because I never played it until this update. It's like, as I was recommended, people kept telling me the game's great. You got to try it. I'm like, I don't have it scheduled. I have an opening. All right, I'm just going to try this game out because everyone keeps talking about how good it is. So I don't have this moment where, this is where it's good, because I was already informed of what made the game good. I was like, okay, I'm going to look for those things. And as soon as I got into it, to me, it was very enjoyable from the get-go. Like 15, 20 minutes into the game, I was already hooked on it. I think I spent 6 minutes into the game and then I just tabbed out and bought it. And that was my experience. So I was like, this is going to be fun. I think that in general, because I don't have any reference point to how it was before or versus after when it comes to the update and material acquisition and whatnot, I think that the only things that I stumbled upon that I felt was, this is a bit annoying, was the feeling that I had to go back and farm goddamn trees and ores. That's probably the only thing that I was a little bit annoyed with outside of fall damage, but we'll probably cover that in a bit as well. And because it was my first time playing it, I chose not to engage with multiplayer because I didn't want to get carried by someone who played it beforehand. I wanted to explore it and see what's available, the different weapons and what I could do with it. So I had a really good time. And for me, it was like the first time touching the game at all. So that's why I wanted to see what DM's take was on it first here. Because my approach is very different since this was my very first time, right?
And I could add in... sorry, guys. You going?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd add one more part, too, which is like the healing aspect of it. If I remember from the beginning, you didn't have the heal portion of the focus from the start. And I feel like that actually added a significant amount because like not having a way to heal and like getting gated behind to get food added tedium to a portion where I kind of had like constantly like heal myself. So I feel like the heal rune like actually kind of immediately helped a lot, to be honest. I found myself using that significantly.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We added that, I think, with Breach Refined. And we always had it in there for some time, right? Like there was the heal rune and the heal aura rune and so on. But it wasn't like it was something that you had to get in town first, right? And so you didn't start with a way to heal through focus, right? But you could get it fairly early, right? So we thought, hey, that's okay. But then when we added it, it helped a lot of players, right? Just to have that other way of healing available right away, right? So, yeah.
What do you attribute it to?
I don't really have anything else to add to it. I feel like it was my very first time touching it, and it got me really hooked. I'm very much enjoying it. And then in the middle of my playthrough, I get linked a teaser video of you, Thomas, playing something with summoner stuff, and I'm like, bro, this guy is like right up my alley. Like, I'm here. Let me have
That's
it.
good. Yeah, I'm sure we'll go over a lot of this stuff in this meeting, right? It's interesting also if you look at the trajectory, right? I think there was a lot of kind of like diversity at the start regarding us basically just saying, hey, No Rest for the Wicked is a new ARPG, right? And I still find that so interesting, right? I think there's a whole new generation that didn't grow up playing Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 and so on, right? Because to me, those games were so different than modern ARPGs, right? Where there's a very clear cut with like Diablo 3, where it became like, hey, basically what the Diablo 2 endgame was the MO for Diablo 3, right? Like it was immediately like, oh, shoot a ton of stuff and like constant spam and like piano play, right? On the keyboard and so on. And I think in a lot of people's heads right now, Diablo, like that is basically what an ARPG is, right? Like it is what Diablo 3 is and what Path of Exile 1 and 2 and so on have become, right? And we generally always wanted to kind of like take it back a little bit, right? Because to me, I have this whole thing about when we started on Wicked, right? Like it became immediately clear. Like I was a huge fan of Monster Hunter. And the first time I played Monster Hunter, the PSP, right? It was this immediate, oh my God, imagine we have something like this in a Diablo-esque game, right? If somebody could handle that, right? That would be the greatest, because now you're solving the point and click problem, right? Because, and I'll have some very interesting discussions very soon with a lot of the ARPG people, with the designers, because I personally see a huge issue in that abstracted playstyle that you have in those games, right? Where it's like, I completely get why this was chosen in the mid 90s and even in the early 2000s, right? But it doesn't really make sense anymore. And the problem that I'm seeing is that whenever that is picked, it doesn't matter which ARPG you look at, right? But if it's rooted in point and click, the end game inevitably becomes power creep, right? Like just that's, and the developers even like lean into that, right? Like it just becomes like, yeah, this procs with that, and then that procs this, and then da-da-da, right? And then it becomes about screen wipes and so on, right? Which I think is really unfortunate from a actual gameplay perspective, right? Means is that I don't have anything against power creep itself, but what that really means at some point is that every class kind of like starts playing the same, right? And that's what I want to get away from. This whole thing of like, I want every class to feel really unique. And that's something that I'm working on right now, right? Like that we go into, hey, an assassin needs to play like an assassin, right? Like I want to be able to hide in the shadows and then do backstabs and do sneak attacks and that kind of thing, right? And I don't think that stuff would even be possible in most modern ARPGs, right? So I think there's that discussion is going to be very interesting, because I think there's really a fundamental change that needs to happen. And maybe some players will not like that, right? Because players are usually like, don't like change, right? They're all saying, add new stuff and so on, right? But then if you do change, a lot of times it's like, oh my God, we need to educate the public to some degree, right? And make them understand, no, this is good, right? Like there's good stuff here, and, you know, we'll polish it and we'll do it. And then you get there, right? But it's similar to that whole, like, there was this Alien game on the PlayStation 1, right? Where they, for the very first time, did like analog stick, like the thing that they're doing with the analog sticks today, right? Where it's like, hey, the right analog stick is for moving around and for looking around, right? And the left one is for moving around. And when people first tried it, they lost their shit. And all the journalists were like, this is the worst fucking input method ever, right? And it took some time, right? Like it took some time, like, so Halo did it and a bunch of other games did it, right? And then it became the standard, right? But sometimes we go through these things where it's like, no, you need to kind of like go through a painful process, but then, trust us, it is the right thing.
How much of the player base do you believe is in the Venn diagram that like plays both? So you're talking about like modern ARPGs, and I very much understand what you're saying, right? Like I play modern ARPGs, I'm obviously a fan of this genre, and they are very much blaster centric. Like this is kind of what they all evolve or devolve depending upon your view of the subject, like into effectively. Okay, and then you have you, which I just finished playing through all the Dark Souls games. So admittedly, I skipped the majority of 2 because 2 wasn't for me. But I was playing the Dark Souls games, and I could very much more see what I would consider Dark Souls, both from map design, like the way you guys do shortcuts, verticality, things like that, like intricate world design from a smaller world, more layers, as opposed to bigger world, more exploratory, right? So I could definitely see a lot of the Dark Souls in the map design. And then obviously the combat speaks for
I would
itself.
question bigger world is more exploratory, by the way, right? Like that is something I would fight
Yeah, sure,
against.
sure. I mean, I
didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you get my, I guess I more meant like horizontally explorable. But yeah, I understand your point. So I could see that a lot more from the Dark Souls perspective. And that's kind of what I consider the other part of the circle. So how much of this Venn diagram that really overlaps? You got the blasters and you got more of like the intricate world design. How much of this are you guys targeting for an overlap? Like what percentage of players would you say you think are the type that are convinced or could be convinced of this style, and it's an education issue as opposed to like just your fundamentally different demographics?
Think that way, right? Like I really don't think that way, right? Like our goal is very simple, right? Like we just try to make an amazing game. Obviously, we take inspiration from this and that, right? And obviously, we want audiences from basically all of those things to be interested in Wicked, right? My hope is that players who play Diablo are gonna love Wicked, players who play Souls are gonna love Wicked, players who play Zelda are gonna love Wicked, right? And then now I also want to get the people who play roguelikes and the people who play farming games and that kind of stuff, right? And ultimately, after 1.0, I hope I'm also going to convert the people who play survival games because we're going to have something really sweet for them. So I don't necessarily think in that way where it's like, oh, we'll address the market of the, it's going to be 70% Souls players or something, because I want to make a game for everybody, right? And not in the sense of, like we're going to dumb it down, and make it casual so everybody gets it, right? Like, no, but just it has to be so fucking good that it's hard to ignore us, right? That kind of thing.
That's a fair take. I think that, like, in general, games like No Rest or Souls like in general, where like the meaningful combat is actually meaningful, and you get to the point where when you die, it is almost always the case of it's your own fault for dying kind of thing, which creates the highest of highs, lowest of lows kind of feel. I'm also working on the Dark Souls because I haven't played all the Souls games before. I did Elden Ring and Night Rain. I'm working on Dark Souls 1 right now, so I see what you're saying, DM, with a horizontal exploration.
It's fucking level design, by the way. Like Dark Souls 1 is still masterclass.
It's good. A couple of rage quits, and I'm halfway. I don't think I'm halfway through. I'm going to the cemetery next to see how that goes. But yeah, it's been fun so far. But it's also for me as a gamer, I feel like I get to the point where like I have to be in the mood to play it. Because the generic way that we normally play isometric ARPGs is, the blasting thing, we get to the creep point, is very relaxing at that point, depending on the state of gear in the game you're playing. Whereas in No Rest, we're at a position where you have to actually, be engaged and actively thinking about what you're doing. Because if you're not actively playing the game, you're not going to have a good time. So it's quite the opposite on the spectrum there. I kind of like that. And in this latest update, you had the multiplayer stuff coming in. And like I said, I don't know what the difference is from the new update compared to what was before, since this was my first time playing. So I guess my question would be more about what is the next big stuff that you guys are introducing to the game? Like, what's the plan for your next patch, essentially?
So with patch 1, we're basically just looking at all the feedback that we got, right? There's some obvious balance stuff that was kind of stupid that we didn't notice it immediately. So we're fixing that. Then we're also introducing new systems, right? We are doing a sneaky thing where we want to like support PvP, but only in a teasing way, right? Like, so there will be a dual mode where if you guys play together, right, you could literally just interact with the other person and offer them to duel, right? And then There's an arena that gets formed in that place where you did it, and now you're fighting there, right? And it's not going to be balanced or anything, right? It's not going to be competitive or any of that stuff, right? It's just going to be fun, right? But we will use that data and look at that stuff to kind of like, take that forward into the actual PvP modes that we have planned, into the arena and all of that stuff, right? So that's why we're doing it in a sneaky way. The other thing is, I finally want to bring in the comfort system. That's a system that I kind of like built over the holidays. And it's what that does is it's basically taking, the same thing that you have with character development, where you over the course of the game level up your character, right? Now here's a pretty clever system that kind of like looks at how interesting did you build your house, right? And then that feeds back into the rest of the game, meaning that it's actually analyzing what items you have placed in your house, how you've placed them, what the quality of those items was, how much variety you placed there, right? So you can't just kind of like put 50 times the same item in and have that be a thing, right? Like, and have that kind of like up the rating, right? So it does a lot of kind of like tricky things, right? And it also adds multipliers, right? Like if you build this in this way, it adds a multiplier on top and so on. So now we'll see people kind of like leveling their house, but doing so by actually, set dressing the house, right? And decorating it and so on, right? And putting nice stuff in there. And then you get basically a bonus based on that. You get like your house gets a comfort grade. When you go to sleep, you now get a buff based on how comfortable your house is, right? And that kind of thing. So that, like we're doing more and more of this stuff where it's like, okay, it's not just about your character. It's also about building up the town. There's lots and lots of town upgrades that we're currently working on. And then there's, stuff like this, right? The housing, the farming, and so on, right? So, because ultimately we want the end game experience and so on to be something where it's just, oh, if I currently feel like I don't want to do this thing, oh my God, there's 12 other things you could do right now, right? So that you don't put the controller down or the keyboard down.
So what is the farming?
Funny that you...
Oh, sorry, go on, GHAZZY.
I was just going to say that I think it's funny that you're doing that because, like, I got the house, and the first thing I'm thinking is, this degenerate, monkey style approach of looking at efficiency. I just put down the bench crafts and then a wall filled with storage. I would go in, do my little route, do this, click on these things for recrafting new materials, dump it all in the stashes, and then I'm out again. So it just became this hub of storage rather than a house immersive approach to it. So I kind of like that. That's funny.
That'll play against you because the storage is not going to give you comfort value, right? Like we were kind of sneaky about that, where it's like, okay, if you're actually using your thing as a warehouse, it's not going to be very comfortable. So you will have to actually get into it to up that value.
I like that. I have a follow-up question, but that kind of segues to another topic. What were you going to say, DM?
I was just wanting to hear more about the farming side of it. You said with the farming update, and I was curious to hear a little bit of a teaser on what you got planned for the farming side of it.
Yeah, so we're currently kind of like, some people have already found this, right? Because we're always putting up these fucking invisible walls and like structures everywhere where it's like, we don't want you to go there yet, right? And then somebody finds out, oh, but you can climb this barrel. And then if you jump from that barrel to this other thing, and then you jump onto this roof, now you're suddenly outside of the thing that the developers absolutely put there so you can't get there, right? So we're expanding Sacrament in many ways, right? So on the outskirts of Sacrament, there will be farmhouses and so on. And then it is literally Stardew Valley, right? Like you will literally have, okay, here's your house. It also has some plot, right? And you need to till the ground with your hoe, and you need to put seeds into the ground, and then you water it and so on. And it's completely optional, right? So most players will not have to do this. So GHAZZY, this is not something where it's like, oh, you have to cut the trees and farm the ore and so on, right? This is completely optional. But you can play the game that way if you want to, right? So, for example, if you have a spouse, like my wife, for example, she would be very interested in just playing that mode, right? And basically playing it like Stardew Valley and making $1 million just, farming crops and doing that, right? And then I come home and I'm like, oh my God, we can get all these upgrades now because you did a really nice job on this, right? And then I feed into her stuff again because, hey, I found new seeds and new this and that, right? And now you can, I have this new tool for you and so on. So I want all of those systems kind of like to interconnect, right? And ultimately, yeah, it's kind of like how Minecraft introduced a lot of these elements, right? Where it's just, hey, you can fucking farm in Minecraft and do all of this stuff. I think there's a lot of value in doing that. I actually really loved how Chris Wilson is fucking crazy, right? But because he sees every game as an ARPG, right?
Yeah.
And then he had this really interesting video where he basically broke down Minecraft and was like, this is a fucking ARPG, right?
Yeah.
And to something, like I had a hard time hearing his reasoning, right, to disagree with him. Like, yeah, in many ways, it's even more fucking hardcore than any Diablo or PerfectXL that you ever played.
Yeah, true. I'm kind of a side topic, but watching his YouTube channel it's actually been hyper entertaining. You're watching all of his videos. Yes. I'm assuming, yeah, they're pretty.
Of course I am.
It's been great to watch the Chris Wilson YouTube arc was not on my bingo card. This is a going meme, but yeah. it's been very enjoyable. When it comes to,
I think Chris Wilson is generally a very interesting person to talk. I had the pleasure of talking to him, I think, shortly before Christmas and so on, right? Because I just wanted to get his sense of like, hey, how does he feel about No Rest for the Wicked and what we're doing and so on, right? And I very quickly got like he's obviously working on a new thing, right? And that's going to be very interesting to watch. But I think that man has one true love in life, right? And that's Diablo 2. Yeah. So I very much think that his new thing is very much going to be inspired probably by Diablo 2 again.
On their website, they had when they were looking for hire, it said that you'd have to have a deep understanding of specifically Diablo 2. Like that's what it said on the website. Yeah. So I think you're right on that. You mentioned endgame stuff. So again, I've only had one proper experience with No Rest so far. I think it's really good so far. I have a few complaints or feedback, criticism, if you will. One is fall damage, and the other part is endgame. To me, the endgame felt lackluster. It was very limited to what I could do. They had this indie game, the whatever it was called, the Crucible thing, yeah. And then you had like the whole the terrorizing zones.
There isn't really much of an end game yet, right? Like we are basically in this early access where it's like, hey, we have half of the game, but we just did the Crucible to like, hey, let's give people something so it's replayable, right?
That's how I perceived it as well, and that's what I've been telling chat and whatnot when I've been streaming it and been like, okay, but I mean, the game is far from done. Let them cook. It's been my opinion. So my question to it is, what is the idea? Like, what's your vision for the actual end game you guys will have when everything is said and done? And the follow-up question before you answer that, are we looking at the possibility of something like a live service, seasonal kind of gameplay approach, or do you guys have another way of going about it when it comes to replayability for the end game?
Yeah, let me answer this question. So in terms of like how I see the end game, right? It's not going to be surprising that I just want to squeeze the shit out of what we built here for the last almost 10 years or so, right? And do all the things that are traditional kind of like classic ARPG by now, right? Like couldn't do. Like do all the things that if you have that point and click system, you can't do it. And let's start with PvP. I think PvP for a lot of players is going to be the end game thing, right? Like we have a lot of players, a lot of devs in the team that played like 300, 400 hours of Dark Souls, right? And they didn't play it for the campaign. Or they just played 300, 400 hours just PvP in Dark Souls, right? Yeah. So they didn't even care that much about the campaign. They just wanted to compete, right? There's this interesting psychological study on video games, right? Of like, who are the player types and so on, right? And so there's this huge crowd that is just about competition, right? They want to have a better build than everybody else. And their satisfaction comes from, I just want to beat people, right? I just want to climb up that ladder. I just want to be better than everybody else. I want to be number one in the world, right? That kind of thing. Or at least in my area or something, right? So that's something. I was there at Blizzard, by the way, back then when Diablo 3 came out. And if you guys remember, Diablo 3, like there was always this thing of like, at some point we'll have PvP, right? And then there were even some BlizzCons. I don't know if you guys were there, but where people were able to play PvP, right? And in a controlled environment, that totally made sense, right? Because you, like, as a developer, you could say, no, this character only has these spells, only deals X damage, right? And, you know, like you can set up something even with the point and click stuff where it's like, yeah, this is a fairly decent experience. It's not horrible, right? But now imagine you have a fighting game, right? And those characters that you control are not controlled by the designers, but they're just systemically driven, right? And they already have like all these multipliers and crazy shit on them, right? And like A procs B and B procs C and C procs D, right? And now you're like, okay, I'm one-shotting literally every fucking thing, right? And now it's not fun anymore. Like you literally, I think I'm a pretty good designer. I would never, I don't trust myself to figure out how I would actually do PvP in a structure like that, right? It's just, I don't think it's possible. But with something like Wicked in many ways, like what Dark Souls and Monster Hunter and so are, and the way they're authored and the content is authored, right, is that, well, every attack is animation based, and that automatically basically turns it into a fighting game, right? Like that is exactly how Street Fighter is authored, right? If you have a high punch, like a strong punch is this, right? And it has X amount of frames, right? And it's exactly the same thing that we are doing with Wicked, that From did with Souls, that Capcom did with Monster Hunter and so on, right? And suddenly PvP makes a lot more sense, right? Because now it's about spacing, it's about timing, it's about positioning and so on, right? Those kind of things. And it's not about who can spam the fastest, right? So that's one thing. The other thing that we're doing is, well, there's a lot of modes that we're working on, right? So in the Crucible, what you have right now is the small little test that we did for like, hey, could a roguelike thing work in Wicked, right? And you basically have these 10 rooms that you go through. They're randomized a little bit, so it's not always the same. And then you get to the end of it, right? And meanwhile, as you defeat enemies, you actually gain some, you gain traces, and with the traces, you buy boons, right? And those let you upgrade your character. And it's quite fun, but there's obviously a lot more depth that we can squeeze out of that, right? And a lot more, I think, that we can do there, right? Just to kind of like get it to the same level as like a Hades or, any other roguelike that's out there. The next statue that you have there is basically a horde mode, right? Where we're doing our Vampire Survivors thing, which, by the way, we almost shipped even back then during the Crucible update. We had it almost ready, right? It's a wave-based thing, right? Where it's like, okay, now here's a gigantic arena, right? And there's just hordes of fucking enemies spawning, right? And you need to kill them. And while you're killing them, you also need to get boons, right? And then there's more spawning. And so you kind of like have to fight that, right? And then every X waves, there's a fucking boss spawning. And now, how long can you survive? That kind of thing. And it's a myriad of those things, right? The farming to me would be an endgame mode. The sanctuaries would be an endgame mode. This would be an endgame mode. The PvP is an endgame thing, right? And now the thing that we are working on, or how we structured our early access, right, is that obviously we wanted to do the most difficult thing first, which obviously is, let's prove out that the combat, the gameplay, all of that kind of stuff works, right? The really difficult shit that is hard to get right. And then the systemically on top, that was always planned for kind of like, hey, we'll do that after the fact, right? Like we'll do that on top of things once we kind of like figure it all out. But obviously, kind of like once we released it, we were like, it would be nice for players to have at least a little bit of retention, a little bit of endgame there, right? So that's why we did Crucible. That's why with the Breach update, we also added the Pestilence mode, right? The plague system, where you can actually, oh my God, all these areas get infected and so on, right? That is also an endgame mode, basically, that already starts like halfway through the game. So it was a perfect thing to introduce for the Breach. But what you don't have there yet for the Crucible, for example, or for the Plague system is there's no progression behind it yet, right? Because it didn't make sense at that point in the development to kind of like add that yet. But that's what you will see there, right? Like we will want, obviously there's going to be progression to the Crucible, there's going to be progression to the Plague system and all of that, right? So that layer of depth of just, here's the systemic layer where you could play a long as amount of time, and there's a carrot on the stick, right? And you have to do A in order to get a bunch of B, and then you have to use B to access C, and then you have to use what you get from C to access D, and so on, right? So a lot of that stuff is basically what we're working through right now.
When you were talking about like adding more mechanics, like you have the Crucible, for instance, and you mentioned like farming is an example of one of the ones I want to ask a question about. It's like, how do you feel about like decoupling other game modes outside of the concept of like fighting with your original character? Like farming is going to be independent, right, of your like combat character and the builds and all that you're doing. So how do you feel about adding stuff like, just as an example, like a tower defense mode that's like decoupled from the concept of your character exactly doing the fight? Do you think that like it invalidates what you feel about like a sense of your character progression, or you think that you're open to those type of concepts in the game that's kind of fundamentally outside the scope of the linearness of the game?
You will see us doing a lot of that very interesting stuff. You will see.
Okay. I'll take it as a teaser.
I like that answer.
All right. Let's see. Next
I don't want to give away the kitchen sink, right? We still need to. I usually say too much, and then the team gets a little bit like, Thomas, why did you again leak this, right? But we obviously need to keep some things back for like, hey, the Wicked Inside, we announced something and people are excited, right? So there's a lot of really cool shit that we're planning. And obviously the goal is like, we will squeeze as much fun as possible out of that foundation that we built, because the foundation that we built, I think, is golden. I think we're a generation ahead of everybody else. And I'm saying that because I am pretty certain, just from a development perspective, and that's why I'm thinking like it will be very interesting to talk to all these folks, right? But I'm pretty certain, whether gamers like it or not, that if we see a Diablo 5 getting made or a Path 3 getting made, they will be inspired probably a lot by No Rest for the Wicked, simply because there's no other way anymore, right? Like you can't, like you already see the Path folks kind of getting stuck with Jonathan pushing for more tactile combat, right? And then the other guy going like, oh, no, just fucking, do PoE 1, right? And from a development perspective, you're running out of design space already, right? We've seen those modern ARPGs for 30 years now. The future is not going to be add more bells and whistles on top of it.
What do you think you're most, since you're talking about the concept of like being inspired from No Rest for the Wicked, if you had to put as your forefront, like here's our most inspirational quality that you think another company would look at to be inspired from, what is the one that you would predict the most?
Can you rephrase that? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I understand.
sure. Okay, so basically you're saying that you think like you guys are generations ahead. Other companies will look to you to be inspired from for further development of games, right? That's kind of what you're saying, unless I'm misunderstanding, just to make sure. Okay, so if that is the case, then what quality that you guys are providing do you believe is most thing they're going to be looking at when you're like, okay, this is the part of the game, well, this is the part these other companies are going to be looking at and attempting to mimic? Like,
easily the combat system, like for sure. Like you have to take that step, right? Like even though they might not like it. And I mean, a lot of these older ARPG designers, right? They love their spreadsheets, right? But I think the expectation is different now, right? Like you can't, I mean, you will, right? Like there will always, and I hate, like if people send me all this stuff again, right? Because there's so many fans out there of the typical right now, like the playstyle that you have in Diablo and PoE 1 and PoE 2, and you guys probably agree with that, right? Is that playstyle is super fucking fun. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, right? And I'm sure there will be games that exist that still follow that thing. And I mean, Chris Wilson will probably do it, right? Like there will still be those kind of games, right? I'm just saying from a designer's perspective, we're running out of design space. You literally can't do that much more with that. You're seeing it in World of Warcraft, you're seeing it in Diablo, you're seeing it in Path of Exile, you're seeing it in Titan Quest, you're seeing it in Lost Ark, you're seeing it in all those games, right? Like it all becomes who can spam the fastest, right? Especially at endgame. And so something's got to give, right? And so, like making that combat system more intricate and basing it on animations and adding all that sophistication to it is the thing that they will have to adapt.
I'm not saying, like, I don't think I disagree with you. I do think that another aspect of the thing that needs to be taken into consideration is power creep fantasy, like the power fantasy of ARPGs. Whether or not you like the meaningful tactical combat approach or not. Just like, for me, just like all of us, we're big ARPG fans. But part of what makes me very much enjoy the classical ARPG gameplay through is the power fantasy of it. I like the engagement of it. It's also one of those more chill, lean back kind of gameplay experiences. Whereas when I play No Rest for the Wicked, I would never play No Rest for the Wicked if I'm deciding that tonight I just want to lean back and chill and every time I have a good time and just do that. Unless I have a build that can do that in the game. But when I play No Rest for the Wicked, I'm enjoying it very much. But I'm also the kind of player that I have to be in the mood for it, because I have to be actually paying attention, which also helps get me more immersed into the game, which is a good thing. But now the question really comes down to, what does the general player base want from the ARPG? Like, do they want that?
I completely hear you, right? I completely understand where you're getting it, right? Like, and I think what you're seeing is that based on some of the balance mishaps that we did, right, you can absolutely still design the game that way, even with an animation commit combat system. You can absolutely design a game like No Rest for the Wicked with a huge power creep fantasy, right? Where it's like, hey, you become a god and everything explodes and so on, right? The one thing doesn't change the other, right? It's just about design-wise, you want to have the design space there, right? Like, you want to be able to do more sophisticated stuff. And with the old point and click thing, literally you can't, right? Like, and I don't know any designer who got it done, right? And if it would be possible, I think we would have seen it by now.
I think GHAZZY was getting back to, like, that's kind of where one of my other questions. Remember, I asked you, like, the Venn diagram of, like, the people that like this and the people like this, like, how much of the percentage you're going. That's kind of the point. I think GHAZZY explained it better than myself. I was kind of getting towards. I was wondering, like, how much of the people really, what I'm saying is, do you feel like are looking for that style of combat versus the type of people that are, like, playing, like, the blasting mindless type of stuff? Because there is, like, I feel like there's a pretty world apart. Like, I feel similar to GHAZZY, where when I play one, like, I really enjoyed my time playing The Rest for the Wicked, but it was very hard for me to, like, play that and then compare to something that almost feels like you guys are doing a completely, different genre. Whereas the part that I think the design space, I feel like the other ones are developing is more of the system side of it, which is why I get really curious in what your guys' plans are for systems. Because I feel like a lot of times maybe it's combat's definitely part of it. The meaningful combat meme is not so prevalent in the blaster type of ARPGs, but they are very much more focused on, like, systems, crafting, design space in terms of build style. So what is your guys' plans for continuing the depth of build and systems? Are you guys going to keep doing anything under that regard you want to share today? I know you're reworking the class system, for an example.
Yeah, so we can talk about the class system. I have to be a little bit careful with kind of like sharing too many plans, right? Simply because of, hey, there's a lot of stuff where we want to excite players and announce new things and so on, right? But you will see us do a lot of things, obviously, with PoE. I would say, like, right now, if you compare, for example, and it's to some degree, it's a stupid comparison, right? Like, but if you have to, right? If you compare something like a PoE 2 against No Rest for the Wicked, well, one thing is a blasting game, the other thing is basically a Souls-like, right? But in terms of gameplay and the feel, like, we are clearly smoking Path of Exile. Like, no, it's not even a question, right? In terms of systems, they're clearly smoking us. It's not even they have the whole Atlas and everything, right? And all of the end game, and it's built on 10 years of Path of Exile 1 and so on, right? Clearly, we are not anywhere close to that yet, right? But that's just now, right? So that's basically where we have to, where we have to kind of like do quite some work, right? To kind of like match up with that. And that's the goal, right? That we ultimately want to kind of like create that forever game that, like, you could spend 400, 500, 600, 1,000 hours in, right? And still enjoy your time in Wicked and so on. And that's actually a good segue to go over the class system, right? Because when we initially designed Wicked, we made the decision early on that we would just, it plays like a Souls-like, right? Because we have an animation commit combat system. We'll just do the traditional attribute system. So for decades, basically, we had, like, designers basically chose between two different things, right? You had a hard class system, which is what Diablo, Path of Exile, Titan Quest, blah, 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 right? All of them chose basically hard classes, right? Where you pick your class at the start, like, hey, I play a barbarian, or I play a mage, or I play a whatever, right? And then you are locked into that class, right? A lot of other games, like a Fallout, Dark Souls, and so on, right? All the Souls-likes and so on, they always use an attribute system, right? Simply because those systems kind of like give you a little bit more freedom, but then there's inherent limitations and also huge problems with attribute systems where, like, it's to some degree, it's a bit of an illusion of choice there, right? Because you're like, if you look at how people play those games, right, like they're often not spending any attribute points until they find a build guide, right, like that says to them exactly like, hey, put X amount of points into health, put X amount of points into equip load, then a bunch of points into stamina, right, and they just basically follow that, right? And the problem is like, okay, so if you then have players that do not follow a build guide, right, they will just spend their points however, and then they screw themselves, right? And now as a designer, shit, I need to actually put a respec system into the game, right? And all of that kind of stuff. So with the class system, we're basically trying a new approach. And I've always, like for a long, long time, I've been a huge fan of Yasumi Matsuno and the games that he made, right? Like a huge fan of Ogre Battle, Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy Tactics. I mean, if you just look at these games and from a design perspective, I'm like, that guy was clearly a genius. I can't fathom how the fuck you're able to pull that off in the early 90s and have systems as intricate as that, right? Like it's just wow, right? Like it's just I'm speechless. So the Final Fantasy Tactics system was really interesting. So Final Fantasy Tactics is a tactics RPG basically, right? Where you have all these various classes and all these classes have abilities and so on, right? And you can switch these classes and there's a whole intricate thing to it, right? With like, oh, every time you actually hit an opponent, you get some job points, then you spend these job points to buy some attributes and so on. But ultimately, it's a system where you can master everything, right? And then the powerful thing, the extremely cool thing is you can mix and match, right? And that is the thing that I'm so in love with, right? Because usually what you see in hard class systems, the problem there is, like we've all went through that stuff with, you know, the Diablo 2 and so on, right? Where it's like, hey, cool, I can play a paladin, right? But then basically every paladin kind of plays similarly, right? And then, yeah, you have a little bit of freedom, but that freedom has been given to you by the designers, right? Because they clearly intended for players to play a Hammerdin and to set it, and they set it up in a certain way, right? It's not, hey, some player came up with a Hammerdin build, and that is fucking crazy, right? It's like, yeah, cool. Well, you're basically just unlocking what Blizzard basically has set up for you, right, to unlock. And what the system that we're doing and what the Final Fantasy Tactics thing allowed is because you can mix and match, and because of the way the math works out, is that you can probably come up with an unlimited amount of fucking things, right, that you want to become. And ultimately, what a good class system should do, in my opinion, is just, if the player has an RPG fantasy in his mind, right? Like, hey, I want to play a Grim Reaper, right? Even if there's no fucking Grim Reaper class in the game, right? There should be enough content and enough systemic depth there for you to be able to put that together, right? And for the game basically to support that vision, right? And because of the mix and match and so on stuff that you have there, right? I think that's what will be there, and then it will be interesting, right? Because then it's not, oh, I made a Hammerdin and it's exactly what the designers already laid out for me, right? But it's like, oh, I made a Grim Reaper and we haven't even designed for that, but fuck, you put all these things together and they work and they clearly synergize. Have at it, right? And, you know, I think we'll see some really fucking cool builds and stuff coming out of that.
How do you feel about being able to balance all of that? Like, do you like the idea of people are going to, you know, be able to invalidate some of the combat experience by making some crazy things? Like, is that a key metric of success to you if that ends up happening?
Well, we're an ARPG, and by the way, let me answer one of the questions that GHAZZY had before. We're an ARPG, right? Like, I can already guarantee you, even after we did the PTR, even after we had a lot of people playtest and so on, by the time we ship 1.0, a lot of people find some builds that are like, oh my God, this is OP, right? So we'll keep looking at it. We'll keep updating things, right? That's really the only thing that you can do, because you're dealing with a system where it's literally, well, we're giving you the power to do whatever you want. Let's see what, you know, what people come up with, right? And if we really see something that kind of like breaks the rules, well, we're in charge of the rules, right? So we'll see. And the thing that got regarding seasonal and content stuff and so on, right? I am a little bit worried about that direction that was taken, because I'm a gamer at heart, and I think a lot of times what I'm seeing these days is this whole microtransaction horseshit and so on, right? It's already infected a lot of games that could have been forever games, right? To a degree where it's like, well, they're fucking dead, right? This doesn't work, right? Like even Diablo, like I would love to know what Dave Brevik thinks about. There's a fucking $65 horse skin in Diablo, right? Like it's just ludicrous, right? Like if that's so uncool, right? That's so not metal anymore, right? That's such a lame pussy ass move, right? That you just have, here's this pink horse that you can buy in a Diablo game for $65. It's just insanity to me. And even after everything that we've seen in ARPGs, right? Where it's like, hey, here's the Diablo auction house. What have we learned from that, right? Like, let's just sit back for a second. What have we learned from the fucking Diablo auction house, right? It is clearly that if you give players a chance or a way to pay for something so that they don't have to play anymore, you basically don't have to fucking play the game anymore, right? It's not fun. And so the other problem that you always see is that if one of your revenue pillars is MTX, you have to somehow make people want those MTX, right? How do you do that? By making all the other stuff look like fucking horseshit, right? And it's just, okay, now I'm back to why would I play more of this stuff where you give me fucking horseshit when really the good stuff is over here where I have to flash my credit card, right? So I think fundamentally, if you look at ARPGs, like with some other games, this stuff actually works quite a lot better, right? I would argue like with fighting games, for example, where you put in a character and it's behind a paywall, right? That you kind of like do it like that. I could kind of see that because that's almost like an expansion pack, right? But with an ARPG where it's about loot and you getting cool stuff and so on, right? It's just, it corrupts the game. So my thinking is pretty simple, right? Like a lot of times I'm advocating for, let's just do the old school thing, right? Like why do we have to reinvent the wheel here, right? Like, so, I mean, you just saw From Software releasing Shadow of the Erdtree and making literally hundreds of millions of dollars on a fucking expansion, right? It's probably a lot more than Grinding Gear ever made from any expansion, right? Like, or from any of their patches, right? Why don't we just use that system, right? Where we work on updates. There's a huge expansion always looming, right? And we'll make sure that huge expansion kind of like has a lot of players that buy it and so on, right? And we make it hugely enticing and so on, right? And that will basically get us our war chest so that we can keep updating the game and can keep going crazy throughout the year and so on, and add more systems and add more crazy stuff, right? And that's basically it, right? It's a really simple formula. We'll basically just do it through expansion packs and so on. And that way we don't have to corrupt the fucking game, right? Because again, I also want to have some humility there and say that I don't know how to design an ARPG with that stuff and open that Pandora's box, because it is a Pandora's box. Like once you open that and once one of your core revenue pillars is, oh, I need to have the huge amount of CCUs, because if I don't have the CCUs, then players will not buy all the MTX stuff, right? And then we don't make enough money, kind of like to fund development and so on, right? It's nasty. So I really just want to kind of like educate players on like a fair system where it's like, guys, you're gonna get really high quality from us all the time, right? We're gonna update the game every now and then. There's a huge expansion that funds everything else. I think that's fair, so that players understand, hey, we're paying basically for their work, and we really enjoy their fucking work, right? And that's it. There's no nasty, dark pattern bullshit there.
So speaking of funding, and you have giant ambitions for the game. You want it to be a phenomenal game, obviously. Yep. And that's going to require a phenomenal amount of work as well. And you guys are doing things like the sales. You did the sale 40% off. You said that hurt a little bit. Are you guys able to keep up revenue and sustaining? Like how is that? How's the finance side of it going for development?
I mean, look, we just released the Together update, which was just a patch in early access, right? Like we're still in early access. And we had days where we made more money than we need to fund the studio for a full month, right? So we are fine. We'll be doing okay. And then once you look at, hey, we also will release No Rest for the Wicked as 1.0 at some point, right? And then also on consoles and so on. We're just a team that's made out of like 80, 90 people, right? We'll have more than enough of a war chest to keep going for a long time.
Yeah, you have to excuse me having to ask because we've seen, other notable games in the genre have to like sell their entire company basically in order to be able to like sustain the ARPG.
Yeah.
So it is typically a concern for the consumers.
We've always been quite lucky with how our games have done, right? Like, so even back from the Ori days, right? Like the Ori series has sold 15 million copies. Obviously, we had to spend quite a bit of that money on buying back the rights for No Rest for the Wicked, because when this whole private division thing happened, right? It was like, well, either you do that or you're basically done, right? And so, but yeah, I mean, we are now, again, because we are keeping the costs reasonable, we've never done that Ubisoft thing, right? Where it's like, oh, now we need to have 1,000 developers, right? We've always kind of, like, I always kept this John Carmack thing in mind, right? Where, I don't know how old you guys are, but
35.
back in the, okay. So back in the, yeah, so you guys are a little bit young for that. But back in the kind of like mid 90s, late 90s, right? John Carmack and his team at id, right, were at the top of the fucking industry, right? And instead of scaling up and so on, right, they kept it fairly small, right? Because they wanted to have an elite team. Everybody who worked at id had to be a fucking genius, right? And had to be really good at their craft and exceptionally talented, right? And they were always incredibly, just an incredibly small team. And in many ways, by the way, Valve is still the same way, right? Like I know what they're currently working on and know how many people are working on that. And it's less people than actually working on Wicked right now, right? And I think there's real power in working, like in keeping your team small and keeping your costs overseeable, right? So that you don't fall into this thing of like, oh my God, our costs are so high. We have to somehow be super risk averse, right? And do microtransactions and try to look for profit everywhere because our costs are just unsustainable, right? So, and we don't really have any plans to kind of like explode or grow beyond that number,
When you guys are, sorry, I wanted to follow up on that because you're talking about a thing I'm curious about here. So when you have a small team like that, and you're like, small team of good men, right? Like when you got that group, do you ever worry about like key man factor issues where it's like, okay, well, we have this guy that's really, really important. If he gets hit by a bus, we're fucked. Like at what point is your team being too small, like you start to get concerned about that?
I mean, as you might imagine, right? Like we've been doing this Moon Studios existed since 2009, 2010, right? So that has happened to us before, right? Like we had this crazy, like there was this genius programmer that we had in the team. Just absolute fucking brilliant person, right? And then this whole NFT craze happened, right? And like he was literally offered like, oh my God, you get like $30,000 a month if you join that studio, right? And he said yes. And we were like, oh fuck, what do we do now, right? But I think there's always been a core group of people at Moon that just love what we're doing, right? And we are already in such a lucky position that we are able to make the games that we love. And because we make games that we love, usually they get accepted by the audience that then fund us. And then we get to keep going, right? And so, I think that core group of people just holds everything together. And that's what I want to be really aware of, right? Because I remember there was an interview a couple of years ago with David Brevik where he was asked what his biggest regret was or something, right? From the Blizzard North days. And he was saying that he didn't fully appreciate how magical that team was, right? Like that Blizzard North team back then, I mean, if you would have kept them together, right, and would have kept them happy and everybody understood that, hey, you're also working into your own bank account, right? You're not just a salary person, right? But you keep that team super happy, they would have created amazing things, right? And, oftentimes it doesn't work out like that in the industry, right? Like oftentimes it becomes very corporate and then some people get promoted that shouldn't have been promoted, right? And it doesn't become about, it isn't a meritocracy anymore, but it's something else. And then those teams fall apart, right? But I see Moon almost like the Beatles or something, right? Like a successful band, right? And those band members have to kind of like stick together. Because if John Lennon leaves the fucking Beatles, then yeah, you have a problem.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I feel like some of the stuff you're saying reassures me that this is going to have a pretty bright future. When we're comparing things like when it comes to the marketing aspect, we've seen this happen on other companies quite often throughout the past 2-3 decades. but most closest to us right now, time-wise, would probably be how WoW, for example, is getting Disney-fied and all those things. It's all going into the marketing term at TMA.
Atrocious.
Yeah, like the TMA of it, right? And for those of you who are watching, don't know, it's a total marketing approach. Essentially, just making sure that the game is designed to be as approachable and attractive as possible for as broad of an audience as possible, rather than putting players first, which is kind of.
That's such a stupid, fucking dumb way to think about things, though, right? Like, because there's always this problem, and we went through this cycle so many times before in games, right? Like, I don't know if you guys remember, right? But there's this from 2000, whatever, mid 2000s till 2010 or so, right? We had this whole thing where games became easy and more dumbed down, right? And it ended with fucking Prince of Persia 2008 or something, right? Where it's like, oh, I can't die anymore, right? Like, because fucking hey, if you die, there's this lady pulling you up, right? Because dying is a bad feeling and so on, right? It's fuck that, right? And then Hidetaka Miyazaki came along, right? Was like, I'm gonna make you bitches fucking die all the time with Dark Souls, right? And everybody loved it, right? And everybody was like, Jesus Christ, here's finally a game that challenges me again, right? It's, and it takes skill, right? And I actually have to learn it. And it's not a solved game immediately, right? And it's, it actually takes, brains and so on. And there was this thinking, in order to make the game approachable and to reach a huge audience, that you have to dumb it down. Meanwhile, what we were talking about at Blizzard, right, was that how is League of Legends or any of this stuff dumbed down? It's a fucking hardcore, like everybody's playing it, right? Like there was a MOBA craze back then, right? They were so fucking sophisticated. Like, sit your grandma down with League of Legends and she's gonna murder you, right? Like they're not like a lot of these games that are hyper successful, right, have never been the games that are just fucking casual, right? And I think like that interview that we saw recently, right, where it's like, oh my god, I wanna have kids play World of Warcraft and so on. It's just good luck with that, because we've seen that fucking story before, and it's not gonna end well for you. Like people play Blizzard games because of that fucking Blizzard vibe that used to exist, right? And I don't even get it from how Chris Metzen can, like, Chris Metzen was there from the beginning, right? And then he's like, yeah, let's fucking Disneyfy everything. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like,
that's fortunately the corporate approach to it as well, right? I mean, obviously that plays a factor. When the bigger the corporate, the more corporafied the development becomes. It seems to be the ongoing trend in the industry in the last couple of decades, right? But at the same time, people also praise Blizzard North. People praise
how are all AAA games doing these days?
Yeah, they're pretty much. I mean, you're not wrong in that statement. I'm just saying. I mean, that's part of like why Blizzard North was praised so highly, and the same thing why the original classic team for World of Warcraft has been praised so highly. And nowadays it's it's the take people have on AAA companies is. It's just people are saying it's easier to sell copies if you're not AAA.
A lot of times it's easy to understand how fucking stupid all of this is, right? If you just take a simple analogy, right? Like in the early 90s, right? Grunge was all the rage, right? With Nirvana and so on, right? And imagine you would have used that strategy, right? Hey, Nirvana, Nevermind was a great album. You know how we sell even more copies? We'll now turn you into fucking, I don't know, the Backstreet Boys, right? Like, how fucking stupid would that be, right? And that's literally the approach that they're taking with Blizzard, right? Where it's just, oh, it should be Disney now, right? When it's like, none of your fucking history was built on Warcraft, StarCraft, or Diablo being Disney. Like, are you insane? Like, that's crazy. Just, you have a fan base that loves you and loves what you built. Why are you feeding them mashed potatoes when they want vanilla ice, right? It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
I read a tweet recently where I saw them talking about World of Warcraft specifically, and they had these test groups and polls and whatnot, and people were very much frowning upon the name Warcraft to be part of the title. And they decided against it and just went with it anyways, and look at it now. But I mean, That's how things were decided back then, but it's 2 decades
horrible
ago
name.
now.
Like they had 15 million subscribers a month in the past, right? Horrible name, like really, really bad name. How could it ever be successful?
It's too aggressive.
Yeah.
All right, I got a question for you. So since we're a little bit into like kind of talking AAA and just gaming philosophy in general here, I'm curious about your take, Thomas. So you know the whole high guard thing that happened. You follow the whole high guard situation by any chance?
I did. Yeah, it's fun.
I ended up playing that, and I thought the game was like all right, not amazing, but all right. But I did read the guy's post where he was kind of like, the game was decided in seconds after the response. No one even gave it a chance, and he was kind of like throwing it back on the gamers, basically, as opposed to the game. Like, what's your take on that? Not necessarily like high guard itself, but like the concept of are gamers really toxic and not giving games a chance? Like, do you think that's a real thing, or do you think it's more so like, every now and then the game has a high bar they have to actually pass to get a chance?
Just look at what happened to us, right? Like we are a perfect example here, right? Like ultimately it's about the quality of the game, right? And what you have seen with us, for example, right, is that we released the breach update and we got ass whipped by the community simply because our balance wasn't right? And they let us know. And it's not fucking fun to hear that, right? To hear we worked on this thing for like half a year, right? Like just the update for that, right? And then we released it, right? And obviously you're hoping, oh my God, people are gonna love it, right? And in that case, they didn't. And it didn't take us that long, right? Because we have a good foundation. Like it took us a week or so to kind of like rebalance it, right? To change some of the stuff that we screwed up in the last couple weeks or so before launch. But it wasn't fun. Like we were bombarded with negative reviews and so on, right? Because people were just incensed about how difficult the game was and all of that. And then we fixed it, right? But what you can't do is go and play your fucking audience, right? If they don't enjoy it, they don't enjoy it. You're not in charge of what they enjoy or not, right? And with Highguard, what you saw is that they had phenomenal numbers. Like that Jeff Keighley thing really did his thing, right? Like he put it onto that stage. He got the word out there. And then there were 100,000 people playing the game, right? But if you have 100,000 people actually playing the game, and then a week later you have like 1,000 people playing the game, sorry, that just means that your game isn't exceptional, right? And the problem that you have as a developer is that if you make a fucking hero shooter, you better buckle up, because that hero shooter has to compete with everything that is out there, and it has to be of extremely high quality. It has to compete with all the other first-person shooters that are out there, right? Yeah. And you're basically competing for time, right? Like, do you have, and Sean Layden talked about this in a really clever way. I saw a tweet there where it was like a clip where he said that, right? Where it's like, it's really hard to kind of like make that proposition where you already have people playing Overwatch and Apex Legends and Fortnite and so on, right? And that you then come in with, oh, by the way, we have this other game, and you now will not play Fortnite anymore, right? You're now playing Highguard, right? Or, hey, I'm not playing Overwatch anymore, or whatever, right? I'm playing Highguard, right? And so if your game is not on that level, good luck, right? Like it's really, really difficult. And again, it's also something that we've seen before, right? When World of Warcraft came out, what did we see? The typical thing that always happens, right? Where it's like every fucking studio out there started making MMORPGs because everybody wanted that Blizzard money, right? And how many of those MMORPGs survived? Barely any, right? Yeah. Simply because they weren't as good as World of Warcraft, right? It wasn't malice. It wasn't malice back then, right? It was just, sorry, that game that you made is just not really as good as World of Warcraft. And if I could play World of Warcraft or I play your game and the other, like World of Warcraft is better, I'm going to play World of Warcraft, you know?
I mean, but there's other things to add to that. I do want to chime in on that. I feel like MMOs is very different compared to most genres in the game, in the world, because like the largest portion of why you're enjoying an MMO game is the social aspect of it. And Blizzard's got that marketing money. Because I remember when I was a kid, I took the bus to school. On the bus, talked about WoW. Before class, talked about WoW. During class, talked about WoW. Skipped class to talk about WoW. Take the bus home, talk about WoW. Log in, play the game, and talk about WoW. It was all about those things, right? And as soon as other MMO came out, I had a few friends who played like Guild Wars and stuff like that. They had their own little clique of people. They talked about Guild Wars instead. and that's what made it fun for them. But it wasn't enough players. And that when other companies comes in to make these, rip-offs or copies or whatever, they didn't have that player base. They didn't have that large aspect of the social part of it that made that game survive the droughts and all those things and keep building on it. So I think that's partially why WoW is like one of those most talked about MMO games out there, because it had the player base to survive the down times. I mean, hell, WoW went through Warlords of Draenor and it's still around. I mean, that's just a prime example of it. So, I mean, I think that it's very different when it comes to that because of the social aspect, having such an insane impact on longevity and replayability and just the habit of logging into the same old game after 10 years of playing it on and on and on, compared to other games that don't have that same pressure of the social aspect.
Yeah, but ultimately it's always the same thing, right? Ultimately, you just look at the market, and like, this is why I'm always kind of like pushing for this thing of like, hey, I want to push the genre forward, right? It's not enough to just make another good one of those games, right? So I, like, even with No Rest for the Wicked, right? I think we would have failed if we would have done yet another Diablo-like, right? Simply because, shit, there's already Diablo out there, right? And Blizzard will spend a ton of money on this and like already knows a lot of this stuff. And there's grinding gear games out there who has even been fucking killing Blizzard in many ways, right? So what's the chance that our smallish studio could survive against that if we do the exact same thing, right? Not very high. So don't do the same exact thing, If you don't like the conversation, change the fucking conversation, right? I'm not going to go out there and fight a battle that I probably can't win, right? So you have to give people a different experience. You have to give them something else. I remember reading an interview by the Blizzard folks back then, by the Blizzard designers back then, and I also discussed this with Kevin Jordan a little bit, that even back then when World of Warcraft came out, right, the whole thing was, well, the next World of Warcraft is not going to be a game that is like World of Warcraft. It's going to be a game that plays completely differently, that gives you a unique new way of enjoying an MMORPG or something, right? Because, even there's a reason why Blizzard never made a World of Warcraft 2, right? That's also something that was discussed while I was there at Blizzard, because now you're competing against yourself, right? There's a reason why there's no Minecraft 2, right? Because it's hard to fucking make a game that, once you have that level of content and that level of depth and so on, right? It's extremely hard to kind of like follow up on that, right? If you made fucking Thriller, good luck, writing your next album and making that as successful as that, right? It's difficult.
You're talking about moving the genre forward, and you mentioned in the beginning of this chat that there was a chat coming up with, like, in the ARPG scene, if I heard you correctly. Like, what are the topics you are hoping that come up for the genre as a whole that you think are important to be discussed?
Yeah. I would just love to know from everybody where they see the future of ARPGs, where that is, right? Like, what are the things that we as designers can generally still do to really push the genre forward, right? And also push it into the right direction in terms of business and industry and so on, right? But I really want to see what it is. Obviously, kind of like I made my stance pretty clear already where I think things are going, right? And history will decide if I was right or not, right?
Yeah.
But we'll see, right? And I would love to know where their heads are, right? So where is a Diablo 5 heading? Where is a Path of Exile 3 heading, right? What is there that we can still do, right? Like, what are the things that are super exciting, right? Like, what is our Mario 64 moment in that genre, right? Where can things still head? Because a lot of the things that, like, a lot of the reason why The Rest for the Wicked exists, right, is because I was so frustrated with the genre having become stale. And we're kind of like always getting super excited about, oh, here's another little change on this and on that, right? And it makes me play the game a little bit differently, right? But every now and then, and I tweeted about this, right? Every now and then we need the big step forward. We need that, like, okay, this plays differently, right? Or here we're trying something really new, right? And then that becomes the new standard, right? And so I want to have that discussion, right? Like, what is that going to be? What is that ultimate game that we all dreaming of right now that we could probably only do in like 5 years, 10 years, whatever, right? Because, that's what I'm really interested in.
Do you have other, heads of ARPGs you talk to? You guys learn from each other? Like, what's the communication like?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I already said kind of like, hey, I talked to Chris Wilson before, but we don't really. I mean, they're competitors to some degree, right? I would love to talk to Hidetaka Miyazaki on like, hey, and pick his brains on Souls and so on, right? Because I think the industry owes him a lot, and I think again, like I think that guy is a genius. But not really, right? Every now and then you see people at like trade shows and events and so on, right? And have to have get to have a couple beers with them and so on, right? But yeah, every now and then it's interesting to kind of like have these conversations. But obviously everybody is usually kind of like fairly tight-lipped on where things are going because of NDAs and everything, right? But I'm hoping that we can all kind of like have a conversation, and would be fun even to have that with streamers and so on, right? Like let's just ask that question, right? Because I think it's a fascinating question. Where do you guys see the ARPG going in, like, let's say 10 years, right? What are the things that the genre could still do that would make you guys super excited about the future of ARPGs?
I know the one that comes to my head instantly is clear for me. It's the social aspect. I'm right there with GHAZZY, which is like the reason, like MMOs were my main game, to give you an idea. Like that's my favorite genre of all time. It's where I have most of my hours. It's what I still play the most. Even though I cover ARPGs the most, I play a shitload of MMOs. RuneScape's my favorite game of all time. This whole room is just covered in RuneScape shit, right? And so I'm an absolute fan of that. But I think one of the coolest things, I'll just say Path of Exile 2, for instance. So when I go into town, I look around and there's like other players there. And I can be like, oh, here, I hear what you're saying about the cosmetic side of it, because you look and be like, oh, that guy has that item. It's an important thing for me in MMOs in particular. I can be like, that guy has that weapon, that guy has those shoulders, whatever. Like, shit, fuck him. He got the item I wanted. I think stuff like that's pretty important too. So from a social aspect, I feel like the ARPGs aren't really there because the social part of it is more in economics and economic PvP against the other people, as opposed to, interactions, gameplay, moments, events, stuff like that. I think Diablo 4 tried and failed to accomplish this same concept of having a more, vivid world that is actual living. So I would really like to see that portion of it be moved forward in particular, but maybe GHAZZY has a different answer.
No, I mean, I'm very much stuck in like the old school way of isometric ARPGs, like D2, like that's what I grew up playing. Like, but I'm also in the category of MMOs. But I don't know. I like having the games I engage with to be fundamentally separated. I don't want to have too much influence between one another to blend them into having one be all and end all kind of game. Like I used to play professionally in Dota 2 before I started streaming. I played MMO games. Like you play RuneScape. I still to this day play Tibia. Both games are inspired by Ultima Online, like godfathers of MMOs in my opinion. Like they're absolutely fantastic. And,
did you play Ultima Online, GHAZZY?
No, I went straight into Tibia. Like I was wee little baby back then. So I went into Tibia. This was like 1997. RuneScape came out 98 or first half year of 98. Well, I mean the early playable state of it. Well, either way, it's like and then World of Warcraft came later on, and that's when we all hooked onto it because we were also exposed to the massive marketing of Blizzard, right? But I mean, to develop the game to the next stage, like for me, I'm very much enjoying No Rest because it's different. But I don't want to have the same gameplay experience I have when I'm playing PoE as I have when I have No Rest. And I want those two separated. And when I'm in the mood for No Rest, I would very much prefer to play No Rest. And when I'm not in the mood for that, I definitely would always go to play in something power creep fantasy like Path of Exile, because it's more lean back kind of approach, right? But I'm not immersed in PoE. I'll tell you that. I don't care about the lore. I don't care about those things. When I play No Rest, because of the gameplay experience and the fact that I have to focus on my gameplay, forces me into a situation where I'm, no matter if I care about it or not, I am immersed into the game. And that creates its own enjoyment. I don't ever get that with PoE. I still don't know to this day, after 12 years of playing it, I don't know why we're killing piety 50 times. It's 12 years now. I still don't know. It's like, I go through the lore. No Rest. I played it in 3 streams. More than that, I played off stream, so I had a lot of fun. So I played through it.
What is fascinating though, with what you said is that in many ways I feel like that experience that we had 30 years ago, like playing Ultima Online for the first time, right? It is exactly what Dark, for example, what his ultimate thing is, right? In many ways, it
100%.
is that, right? Because it was this, here's a Wild West fucking MMORPG, right? They didn't know all this stuff yet, right? They just basically put this thing together where it's like, where it did all the fucking things that would be absolutely crazy, where a publisher would show you the door today if you would pitch something like that, right? Where it's just, oh, by the way, like, hey, you come to town and you could absolutely murder everybody, right? And all of this stuff. And it's totally social. And like, oh my God, there were clans where we are just waiting in the forest for newbies to come out and then we ganked them, right? And there were no guardrails and no nothing, right? And it was such a crazy experience to play Ultima Online back then that you don't have that experience anymore. That does not exist in this current landscape at all in any way, right? Simply because EverQuest came out. EverQuest was a bit more streamlined, right? And was also not as complex as Ultima Online because it was 3D, and 3D was hard back then, right? And then World of Warcraft came out. World of Warcraft was basically EverQuest, even more streamlined, even more approachable, right? And with the really addictive kind of like Blizzard design, right? And then that took over, right? But it also had all the limitations from 3D and so on. So we're only now kind of like getting into the state where it's like, hey, we can do a lot of these crazy things back then that were tried 30 years ago that you wouldn't do in a game these days, right? Simply because, you know, it would only attract a kind of like niche audience, right? But that stuff, like there's a lot of that stuff. And I mean, Kevin Jordan that we have in the team, right, was one of the designers at World of Warcraft and played a ton of EverQuest and played a ton of Ultima Online. And, you know, like that, it's very interesting that we can only now start kind of like get back to doing some of that crazy shit again. So that stuff is really interesting to me, right? And I mean, there's a reason why we approached No Rest for the Wicked's multiplayer the way we did, because we saw what was tried with Diablo 4 and Path of Exile and so on. I think to some degree that didn't quite work out, right? Like in Path of Exile or Diablo 4, I'm not getting that feeling that you get in an MMORPG, right? I don't give a fuck about the people that I see roaming around there, right? I don't. That stupid fucking event, right? Where I'm like, oh, here's a big boss spawning and now 50 people shoot fireballs at it, right? I don't give a fuck who these 50 people are. I will never trade with them. I will never talk to them, right? Like they're gone the moment that battle is over. And so that clearly doesn't work, right? So, and then with No Rest for the Wicked, we basically took a different approach. We were like, I don't want to play with these randoms. I don't give a fuck about these randoms, right? But I would want to have an experience where I really care about the people that I play with, right? And that's why we approached it that way. But it's like, no, it's going to be locked down and it's going to be a game that you play, at least for now, right? That you play with people that you know you care about, and we're going to make all the kind of like persistent realm stuff as easy as humanly possible, right? Because we don't want you to have to grab a fucking Windows machine that you have to put in your closet somewhere, right? And now that acts as your server, because frankly, how many people are actually doing that, right? Like there was support in Valheim, Terraria, and so on, but how many people are actually doing that, right? So, and that I think worked. It worked brilliantly, right? I think the co-op experience in Wicked is really like interesting because it does all those things, because it's so fucking different from what you usually have, right? Because you do have these moments where it's like, hey, I get up in the morning and I see what my buddies did, right? And now I'm really glad because they already farmed a bunch of these materials that I needed and so on, right? And there's still a lot I think that we can do there that are really, really interesting. So for example, I always wanted to bring in this thing where it's like, I want to be able to kind of like build a bar in Wicked, right? And become the tavern guy in Wicked, right? Where I'm like, okay, I'm buying a house and then I'm just putting all this really cool stuff there, right? And I'm putting these barrels in there and I fill the barrels with grapes and that becomes wine. And then when I interact with the barrels, I can set the prices, right? On like, hey, you know, it would cost X much to use my barrel. And then the next bear goes to it. And actually for them, it's basically a vendor window, right? So if you want to buy my wine, you know, you have to go up to my barrels and that kind of thing, right? There's a lot that we can do there. If you want to build an armory, same thing, right? Like you could, you know, buy a house, build like some weapon racks and armor racks, right? Armor displays and so on, right? And then just have, hey, I'm selling this, right? And that kind of thing. And I want to build this world that really feels lived in, right? That really feels like it's acting to its own rules, and fuck you, you have to kind of like deal with the rules that the world has, right? And build that into something where it's just, hey, it feels comfortable to live in it, but still, I'm not going to turn it into a game where it's, you know, like a Diablo or like a Path of Exile, right? Where it's like, no, if you go out there, I want the combat to be fucking meaningful, right? So, but there will be lots of experience, I think, that it will just enable people that are into other stuff to also enjoy the game that way, right? Like I want my wife, who would actually play Animal Crossing, right, to get a kick out of No Rest for the Wicked, out of playing it with me. And that doesn't actually, interestingly, mean that it has to be more casual, right? It actually means, no, it just has to have a lot more depth.
You say, I mean, you're obviously a huge fan of Dark Souls. I mean, it comes across bluntly in the game and in the conversation. And you say you want to be able to remember and care about the people that you play with. Is there a world in which you like the concept of invasions or blue invasion? You know, is there any world in which you like that concept in No Rest as well? Or you think these are just like, it's a fundamental mechanic that doesn't work very well in the game?
Well, obviously, we had a lot of discussions about this stuff, right? I do think a lot of that stuff works really nicely in Dark Souls, but it's this thing where it's like one half of the player base loves it, the other half of the player base doesn't, right? It's the same thing as World of Warcraft back then, right? Not everybody played on a PvP realm, right? If you were a little bit, I don't know, touchy, right? Then you probably worked, played on a PvE server, right? And I think like you just have to give players the option to play the game the way they want. I talked about realm modifiers before, right? There's a lot of things that I find really interesting as a designer, right? Where I'm like, I would love to play the game that way. Corpse runs, for example, right? I would want the death for me, for my personal experience, right? I want death to be more punished, right? And corpse runs are a really interesting kind of like way to get there, right? But I know that, well, corpse run mechanics are, you know, like I just put the thing out there on Discord, for example, right? And a lot of our player base immediately went like, what the fuck? No, I don't want a corpse run mechanic, right? But I would enjoy it. And so I think ultimately what you'll see from us is that we'll just give you those options to customize the realms the way you want to, right? And to how your group enjoys playing. And again, like that is something that we've seen before, right? Like if you were into GoldenEye or Halo or any of these games before, right? I always played Halo with like License to Kill on, right? Because the game was frankly, I think, a lot better if it was like, okay, one shot and you're dead, right? And because it was thrilling, right? Like you actually had to have really good aim and so on, right? And it was really thrilling, right? But that's not the kind of mode that you would have set to default back then. But that's fine, right? But if you give players the option, I think a lot of players, like there will be lots of these niches, right? Of people playing it this way and others play it that way, right? And, you know, I think there's something really interesting there.
Okay, so speaking of corpses and additional game modes, this is my segue to talking about hardcore for a moment here. So our hardcore experience, I played with Karn. We were really enjoying it. And what do you know, we're 6 hours in. Karn jumps off the ledge. There it goes. Okay. Then me, you were actually in the chat, by the way, Thomas, and I was swimming to the left, and you're like, hey, the exit's the left. I go left. Obviously, I went to the wrong left, and I drowned from swimming. And that was death number 2. So my question for you is, any thought about maybe something in like hardcore mode when you're walking like towards an edge, you have to click like the A button or something to actually jump off? Or is there have you thought about maybe some adjustments for fall damage in hardcore or drowning, like things of this nature? Because it kind of makes it a little weird when you die in that way in hardcore, right?
I think the actual design solve, like obviously these kind of like experiences where you fell down in a stupid way, right? Like if it was actually a bug or something, right? That should not happen. That's something that we just have to clean up, right? But the actual design solve here isn't necessarily let's nerf fall damage and let's make sure that, hey, you never fucking die from these moments, right? I think there's quite some things that we can do there to make hardcore interesting. And I think a lot of that is also rooted in how games used to work and they don't anymore. And for now, I'm going to leave it at that. But we'll definitely like have some ideas on like how hardcore mode could be done and what could be really interesting there, right? So yeah, we'll definitely still do quite a bit of work on hardcore mode.
All right, we have figure we're getting towards the end of your time here, about an hour and a half in or so. So I figure maybe we go through some of like the chat questions and some of the ones. You're good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I didn't want to take
Yeah,
your whole day. We have a few chat questions. We have a few other topics just related to like balance related things and some more game mechanic stuff we didn't really get into. Some state of the game type stuff. So how do you feel about the state of range versus melee balance? Was one of the common questions I had seen in the chat. Do you feel like range is OP, or what's your take?
It is a little bit OP right now, yes. And it always will be to some degree, right? So you always have the problem as a designer. By the way, the same exact thing is true in Dark Souls, right? You can totally it's always been the thing, right? Like if you want an easy mode in Dark Souls, you play the mage class, right? And to some degree, that's also true for us, or even more so for us right now with the current balance, right? Like what happened to us is kind of like a little bit unfortunate because I did a lot of kind of like crazy work during the Christmas holidays and just like that entire bow build and like all of the skills and so on, right? I love Christmas because it always gives me that thing where it's like, hey, I get some days where nobody's bothering me and, you know, like kids are in bed and I just get to fucking work, right? And a lot of that bow stuff was just set up by me. You know, obviously, like I just threw it out there, right? Then our QA folks tested it and it all came in very hot, right? And I didn't do some of the basics that we should have done and we didn't get it in anymore. But so for example, it is fucking stupid. And you saw it in your playtest with Riker, right? That you could shoot an arrow from all the way in the back, all the way to some enemy, right? And there's no damage mitigation as the arrow flies, right? Or the arrow doesn't actually fall down to the ground if you're playing with a quick shot build and so on. So obviously that's stuff that we're going to fix, right? To some degree, range will always be good, right? Simply because, well, we need to make, like the other thing that we are working on with the enemies is that they need to have kind of like some range mitigation, right? They need to have some ways to kind of like deal with range, right? Because if you look at the real experience, right? Like if you're standing 10 meters in front of me and you're trying to shoot an arrow at me, right? Our enemies are a little bit stupid, right? I wouldn't just walk up in a straight line to you, right? I would run zigzag to you and just hit you in the face, right? Or pull up my shield or something, right? Like there has to be, like our enemies just have to have more answers to, oh, that, you know, that player here is trying to shoot me with a ranged attack, right? So there's a lot of things that we just still have to do there, right? But to some degree, ranged will always be good. The thing that we are doing right now with the class system, right, is that, well, melee is also really fucking good, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that you can do in melee that will also make it, like there's a lot of kind of like runes that we're setting up right now, right, where you have huge gap closes or, you know, TPs. Like I just set up with the Guardian that you have something very similar to the Warp Strike that you have in FF, I think it was 15, where you know, your guy kind of like throws the sword, right? And then if it lands on the target, he actually grabs the sword right at the target, right? And like swings it, right? And then, you know, you hit the enemy. So there's going to be that stuff, right? Because, and I think a lot of that kind of like will make up for it on the melee side, right? And then, well, the interesting thing is we have enabled the arena again and we'll start doing tournaments again internally. And that actually opens up a lot of interesting things, right? Because we'll have these tournaments internally now where a lot of players or a lot of our devs will try to do bow builds against melee builds, right? And so we'll obviously then I'll make sure that some of the melee stuff, you know, like will be very good against the range stuff and so on. But it's all just fun, right? Like I really want to, you know, like just enjoy that thing with the various classes and kind of like do the rock paper scissors thing and just go nuts with it.
I just want to point out, you said that range caster build is easy mode in Dark Souls. Like,
Here we go.
I have not played the other Dark Souls game. I've only ever touched Dark Souls 1, and chat told me caster builds work. So I went caster build. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I finally found a dude that sells me spells. I bought some spells. It feels pretty good. And I'm at the point right now where I open a white gate, and in front of me is a dude called the Capra Demon, and 2 doggies are fucking me over. And I can't beat that as a caster. So please don't say casters is the most overpowered shit, because I can't even touch this guy without dying. Okay, I know.
But the Capra Demon is historically, right? Like it's a very fun kind of like fuck you for the player, right? Because here's a really difficult enemy in a really confined space with 2 dogs, right? And you're like, Jesus Christ, right? Like, so a lot of the, like, once you have a caster and you get like Soul Arrow and then Crystal Homing Crystal Mass and so on, or whatever it was called, it is very overpowered, right? Like it is, it's just like you will fucking 2-3 shot bosses and so on with that stuff, right?
So I just haven't gotten there yet, is what you're saying.
You just haven't gotten there yet. And like, hey, you also don't have to kill the Capra Demon, right? It's an optional boss. You could go to the sewers first and do all of that stuff, right? You don't have, like, that's the other thing that people a lot of times don't know, right? Like, they just see these bosses and just get stuck on it. I saw the same thing with Darth, right? Like, Darth, you died.
Oh, he's disconnected.
I saw you playing the Riventrins, right? And you just tried it fucking 50, 60 times or so, right? And wouldn't let go until you actually killed them, right? Even though it was just, you could go anywhere else, you could level up, right? And actually get that stuff, right?
You're at the boss, you fight the boss.
Point. It's about pride at that point. Also, when you die
we're building in so many
times,
mechanics,
it's personal.
Meanwhile, we are always like on the dev side, right? Like you're building on these mechanics that where we think, oh, we're so smart, right? Like there's the durability system, right? Like if you try a boss 10 times or so, your durability will be broken. So that should kind of like nod you into the direction of maybe you want to go somewhere else and do something else for a while. Because if you die 10 times in a row, maybe, just maybe you're not good enough for that thing yet, right? But then the player's answer is, fuck it, I'm going to go to town, I'm going to repair my stuff, and I'm going to try it another 10 times, right? And then it keeps going. So,
I mean, it's like I said, I mean, once you die 20 times, it's personal.
Yeah, no, you got to kill him. Like, you're mad. You got to run it back.
Well, the funny thing is, like, I don't know if you guys played Dark Souls 3 yet, right?
Yeah, loved it. Yeah, that was great.
I haven't yet, no.
What was your Nameless King experience?
Okay, so you're gonna hate this. So I didn't have the DLCs when I played it, and everyone told me that a Nameless King is the one boss. There's 2 bosses I guess I didn't run into, and Nameless King was one of them. And every single person in the chat was freaking out and mad that I beat the game without fighting the Nameless King. So apparently I have to go back and do that. So I'll have to respond to that one after I do that.
Nameless King was that for me. Like, I'm a pretty good gamer, right? And I usually breeze through the Dark Souls game, because if you play through Dark Souls and you kind of know how it works, right, then most of the other games are fairly easy for you, right? Like, so then you kind of like have your Dark Souls knowledge, you know how these games are played, and then you can breeze through them, right? And Nameless King is the one motherfucker where it's just, oh my God, as a player, I had the same experience, right? Where I'm like, I must have tried it like 50, 60, 70 times, right? And then at some point I killed him, right? And was like, fucking finally, right? But it's interesting, right? Like as a developer, like we are always trying to do these clever things where we, you know, like try to encourage people to do. There's all these other things that you can do, right? But then, yeah, I completely get where you guys are coming from, right? Because when you're then there, right, and that guy killed you, it's like, fuck him.
Well, yeah, because you don't want to go. You want to beat him. It feels like a challenge. You have the bar. You don't want to go like over leveled and come back and 2-shot him. That's not as satisfying. You got the dopamine is in the win of the moment, because you can always see, like, if I just dodged that, you know, if you can dodge it and knock a hit, you know you can win. So you know it's a skill issue, and you don't want to give in. That's what makes Dark Souls
That's
great.
Actually the interesting thing, though, that happened with Elden Ring, right? I think in a lot of ways, the reason why Elden Ring was so successful is because it did the open world thing, and for some fucking reason, right, open world sells, right? Like, it's, people love the idea of like, there's a huge open world. You look at the No Man's Sky thing, right? Like there's 15 quintillion planets, right? And so on, right? Until you actually finally realize, well, procedural level generation is pretty shit, right? Like, it's just, it's not going to ever create good level designs, right? but the allure is there, right? Of like, oh my God, this game has its own universe, right? Like there's something that is so alluring in that to people, right? But then Elden Ring came out and did the whole open world thing. And the funny thing is how that affected the game, right? Because then you exactly had that experience where every shit player could just do a whole bunch of other stuff, right? Like, oh, I have to kill whatever, Margit or something, right? And that thing fucking kills me, right? In Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, even Bloodborne, right? There weren't that many other things that you could do, right? If you got stuck on something, well, I don't want to go back and kind of like constantly farm, right? But in Elden Ring, you did have that experience of like, okay, I don't have to go open the castle yet, right? There's 10 other places that I can go to, so you do, right? But then you have that also kind of crappy experience where I come back and that boss that kind of like whipped me the first time around, I'm now overpowered and I'm killing him in like 3, 4, 5 hits or something, right? So that's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where Miyazaki is going to take it with the new stuff.
Yeah, it's
another chat question we have was dungeons, like instance dungeons. What's your take on that for No Rest?
Again, like there's a lot of interesting stuff that we're gonna do with the Crucible, right? The Crucible is basically it's this thing that was inspired by Diablo 1, because I was a huge fan of Diablo 1 when I was a kid, basically, and I always loved the idea of like, well, one of our end game modes could be the entirety of Diablo 1, right? That it's like, here's the town, and then there's this thing that you go down into kind of like 10, 15 levels, right? And then at the end, there's a boss, right? That's literally what Diablo 1 was. It was just, here's Tristram, here's the Sanctuary, there's 15 floors, you kill a boss, that's it. That's basically the entirety of Diablo 1, right? And so I loved that, right? And then with the Crucible, we basically just did that and kind of like gave ourselves the freedom to say, but I don't want to have just that experience, right? I don't want to have just these 15 floors. I might want to have these 15 floors, but then give me another way to play that, right? And another way to play that, and another way to play that, right? And a lot of the stuff that doesn't make sense in the campaign, right, makes a hell of a lot of sense in the Crucible, right? Where we can just go wild and do crazy stuff. So that's where you will see us doing some of that. I'm personally not a fan of procedural generation. I think, like, you're playing Dark Souls 1 right now, right? Dark Souls 1 of all the Souls games still has the best world design and the best level design. They never somehow got it to that level again, right? The Dark Souls 2 level design, world design was kind of fucking crazy. And then Dark Souls 3 was good, but not quite on that level, right? Bloodborne was very good, but I would argue still not on that level because it was all a little bit too samey. And then the problem that I always see is that there was this unspoken rule always, right? That ARPGs need to have procedural level design, level generation, right? So that players can play it again and again, right? But I always kind of like felt like that's such bullshit, because when I played Diablo 2, I don't give a fuck about Loot Ghislaine and like how many times like they changed it, right? It's the same fucking experience. It doesn't matter if it's like, I always kind of like had this stance of like, I would rather have a Loot Ghislaine that was designed masterfully, right? Where it's like tons of interactions and I could play it 15 times and I would still find new things, than having it badly procedurally generated every time I play it. And I think that's what we're seeing. Like, I just had this conversation with the Aaron Action RPG guy, right? Like, where, you know, you play these games and it's like, because of the procedural generation, they are so stifled, right? And I just can't do that anymore. Like, I'm playing Diablo 4 and I'm like, there's fucking invisible walls everywhere. It's just basically these little corridors and tunnels, right? And like, they were so excited about like, oh my God, you can jump, right? And the jump is a fucking cinematic that is set up by the developers, right? It's just, I can't do that anymore. It's just, that is such, like, literally, if you look at the tech side of it, right? Like in these ARPGs, you literally, because of the procedural generation, you're dealing with a flat plane. And that does not create good level design. And I come from having designed almost 100% of the levels of or in the Blind Forest, and then a good probably 70% or so of the levels of No Rest for the of Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which were Metroidvanias, right? And in a Metroidvania, the whole thing is that a lot of the quality of your game is defined by how good your level design is. And I can't do it, right? Like, and I might be wrong, because who knows what will happen with AI and so on in the future, right? But I'm very much a person who enjoys seeing an artist putting a level together, right? And a designer really laboring over every inch of that world. And my bet was always that over time, we are building an open world, but we're building one that is handcrafted, right? Where it's like, it's gonna be a ginormous world, but it's one where every single one of these fucking levels has been handcrafted, right? And, you know, like, and it's built with so much depth that, you know, you're still going to find new stuff even years after you played it and so on. So that was always my thinking. But Crucible is where we will try crazy stuff, where, you know, we'll see what we can do there.
So, word to the level design for a moment. When you're talking about handcrafting the world, and you're leading back to Dark Souls 1, right? When you're doing it all on kind of the same plane, like you have the main town, is it getting exponentially harder, the level design portion of it, as you go on and you add more and more and more content? You got to kind of all pack it in the same area. Like, you had this shortcut with the Breach update, right? So it's like, as you're adding more and more content in the same area, is it getting harder, or is it really kind of the same all the way through? They continue to add more and more layers to that cake.
No, it becomes more fun. Like, it's this whole thing where it's like, well, I studied sculpture initially, right? Like, I always wanted to be a kind of like CG artist in the industry, right? And then my way to get there was to study traditional sculpture and to actually become good at the craft, to then apply all that knowledge with 3D and so on, right? And that's ultimately how I got a job at Blizzard and that kind of thing, right? Because, you know, like, that's what I was doing. And even to this day, I apply that knowledge from sculpture to pretty much everything, right? And the way I level design is the way I sculpted, and the way, you know, I approach stories is the way I sculpted, and so on, right? So usually it's about like throwing something in, right? And then forming it and adding a little bit more over there and changing that, right? And like then seeing, okay, how does this aspect here affect that other thing, right? And what's the balance of it? What's the gestalt of the piece? And world and level design is very much that, right? And it's one of these really underrated things, especially in the Western industry, right? Like, I think the Japanese and so on still do it extremely well, right? If you look at Nintendo and the way they do world and level design, it's fucking crazy. Like, it's from another planet. And obviously From Software, right? They have a lot of respect for that, right? But in many ways, like the Western developers have all become kind of like, just, hey, it's an open world, it has to be designed in an open world. And if you know how open worlds get designed, right, that it's just terrain sculpting, and like, just you start with a huge fucking swath of just, you know, like, here's basically a little hills and valleys that I design out, or like that I sculpt in a super rough kind of thing, right? And then somebody needs to fill that in, right? It's a bunch of bullshit. Like, it's just, I hate that way of approaching level design. Like, to me, it has to be approached like sculpture, right? Where it's like, you start with the very simple basics, you figure out the gestalt and so on, and then, you know, like, you do it bit by bit. Sorry, did that answer? Like, I kind of like rambled off there a little bit. Did that answer your question? What was the question again?
No, it did. I was just asking, like, if it becomes increasingly more difficult as you pack more into the same area and you have to make it all interweave and connect.
No, it becomes more fun, right? Like, it's this, yeah, it's just, as you see the thing come together, it becomes easier to kind of like understand, oh, and I'll add a little bit more over there, right? Sure. And I add a little bit more over there. And then I'll make that connection, right? And oh my God, people will think we're so clever, right? Because that connection is there and so on. It just becomes more fun. It's like, it's so exciting, right? Like, every day you wake up and like, I look at Isola Sacra and I see the world becoming bigger and, you know, more intertwined and so on, right? And I think it's just really fucking fun. I would love to, once we are done with 1.0 and with the expansions that we'll have for 1.0, right? I would love to do a fucking 3D print of the entirety of his little Sakura, right? And have that in my house somewhere where it's just, here's the entire thing. And, you know, like I could actually touch it, right? Like that would be so sweet.
Okay, so we should probably get through. I think we have a couple more chat questions here that we should get through before the end of it. Someone was asking earlier in the chat about couch co-op with the multiplayer being like pretty good and successful. Any plans for implementation of things like, you know, same console, same PC couch co-op?
Yeah, so that was interesting. So here's my stance on this, right? So we saw couch co-op for the first time in an ARPG, I think, with Diablo 3, where they did it, and they did it really nicely, right? Where it's just, hey, it turned Diablo into a fucking party game, right? I remember playing, like I always had this group of people where I played with my 2 brothers and my best friend, right? And suddenly we were 4 players, and that was perfect always for, you know, all the 32-bit, 64-bit stuff and so on. And I kept playing with them for quite a long time, right? And we always played games like Halo and all of that stuff in split screen and blah, blah, blah. And then Diablo 3 came out, and suddenly, like for the first fucking time, right, we played Diablo like a party game in the same way we used to play Halo or GoldenEye or Bomberman or Worms or something, right? With everybody just enjoying it. And then the thing that happened, like the shitty limitation that you had in Diablo 3 was, with 4 players, if somebody opens the inventory and wants to change out the gear, everybody else can go get a coffee, right? Because the fucking screen is taken over, right? And that sucks to some degree, right? But then the thing that was done there to make that better was with Diablo 4, and Grinding Gear did basically the same thing with Path of Exile, right? Is that, hey, we have couch co-op, but now it's only 2 players, right? But I think there's a really magical thing missing if you kick out that third or fourth player. And the reason why they did it is because they split the inventory in half, right? They basically had, okay, we don't have that limitation anymore. We take over the screen and some people have to wait. We're just splitting the thing in half, but the huge limitation that you have now is it's just 2 players, right? And that really sucks. That's really bad. So when we release together, like there's always this whole thing of like, here's the top things that people want, right? On the number 1 spot is still consoles, right? When is that coming? So we are working on that. Then it used to be co-op, right? Now that has changed to couch co-op, right? I'm getting spammed by this every week, right? Like, hey, do you guys support couch co-op? Will that come? Blah, 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 right? And so that changed it from something where we said, no, we're not going to support that because it's really hard to do in many ways, to we're investigating, we're looking into it. But I don't want to make that mistake that I think Blizzard made with Diablo 4 and that I think Grinding Gear Games made with Path of Exile 2, because I think there's magic in having a group of people, right? In having the, you know, chips and cola, 4 people in front of a TV. Like that fun you don't have with 2 players, right? That there's just something magical in your entire posse sitting there and like just having time of their lives just blasting each other, right? And I had some interesting conversations with Nintendo already, and there's some interesting stuff that I want to try there to solve that issue.
Okay.
It's funny that you mentioned that with the first couch co-op, because I remember my first couch co-op was my very first ARPG experience. I played Diablo 1 on the PlayStation with my little sister.
Oh, yeah, I did that too.
That was a good time.
Oh, do you remember how the whole save game was like taking off the entire fucking memory card, right? Every single block of the memory card.
Yep.
That was
and I remember having extra memory card blocks to make sure I had everything covered. I also remember the glitch you could do by loading a character, dropping all the gold, and then reloading that other character to get more gold.
Yeah. But that was also already a really fun experience, right? Like that was also like I enjoyed that. There was also all the RTS games. Like I remember even like playing fucking Command & Conquer Red Alert on a PlayStation with like 2 screens with link mode and so on. But there is magic in couch co-op, right? But I think it has to be done right. And I think the you don't do it right if you only have 2-player support.
Yeah, more like Super Mario Party games. Like I play that with my fiance. She's not even a gamer, but we can sit down and play that on the Switch and whatnot. And having friends over, like you said, Coke and chips on the table, just go ham. It's fun.
Yeah, it's just some of the best experience that I ever had as a gamer were like things like playing what was it called? The PC Engine tennis game, Final Smash Tennis or something, right? Or Bomberman or Worms or Mario Kart or, you know, like any of these things, like Halo in fucking split screen was the bomb, right? Yeah. So that would be really interesting to see, right? If we can turn No Rest for the Wicked into that kind of thing. But that requires a lot of problem solving, which we're good at, but it has to be done in a way where it solves those design issues.
I'm glad you're considering it, because couch co-op is, I feel like, very slowly losing relevance to people. And I know it's a smaller percentage of people, and the companies just don't really make games as much like couch co-op anymore. And it's kind of sad to see that most of the games is like, oh, this looks like a fun game, and I'll look, oh, is this 2-player like couch co-op? Can I play with my girlfriend or something? And it's like, nope, it is not. And it's just so plus one.
Right? At the same time, right? There's this crazy Joseph Ferris guy. I probably mispronounced his name, right? But that guy who did Split Fiction and so on.
Oh, right? That was my game of the year. I loved Split Fiction, yeah.
Exactly, right? And there's just something inherently fun playing a game together with people, right? And he's doing these kind of like couch co-op games where it's literally like, well, fuck you if you want to play it alone, right? Like you have to play it together. But in doing so, he can create a lot of experiences that you literally can't have if you play alone, right? And so, yeah, I think couch co-op is a very interesting subject, and we are definitely looking into it.
Good to hear. There's only 2 last questions that we had on the list that have been pulled from chat from earlier. One of them is asking about crafting on quivers, and the next one is asking about, you mentioned a Casso potentially you could buy in 1.0. Someone said,
wait, what was the first one? Crafting quivers?
Crafting on quivers is what somebody asks about. Like,
so obviously, like, quivers came in because I was crazy during the holidays, right? And I just surprised our folks with like, hey, I made some quivers, right? And I just came up with this implementation, and we ended up putting 4 in there simply as I think people would enjoy that, right? Sure. But it clearly, like, we only had 4, right? So there will be more coming, and we didn't support enchantments on it, right? And they're not quite what we want, obviously. So like, you will see more stuff from that. There will also be, by the way, enchantments on tools and so on, right? Because I think that experience of like cutting down trees and farming ore and so on could also be a little bit deeper. So that's something that we're working on. What was the other thing?
I was asking about Casso. Somebody said you mentioned the Casso in the recent interview. I think it was.
Oh, the Casso, yeah. Yeah, so that's the Ultima Online thing, right? Like, I always wanted to have a castle. And so we built Sacrament with this huge fucking fortress at the top of it, right? And I always had in mind, that's going to be for the 1%, right? That's going to be for the crazy people who spend a ton of time playing Wicked, right? Because that's what Ultima Online was, right? If you owned a fucking castle in Ultima Online, you were the fucking king on that server, right? Like, it was just... Because Ultima Online had, like, limited real estate, right? And it's no mistake that in Sacrament, there's limited real estate, right? And, like, that is a real thing, right? Like, if your buddy... Like, if you're playing and your buddy grabs the coolest house right next to the marketplace or something, that fucking stings, right? But then the idea was always that I want to have this guild house kind of like experience, right? Similar to Ultima Online, right? Where you could actually stash all your stuff. And like, if you are really kind of like that dedicated, right? That you could have that fucking prestige object at the top of Sacrament. And that is coming. That's even coming with 1.0 already. That you can purchase that, but expect it to not be cheap, right? This is one of the, you will have to do a lot of end game stuff. You will have to really get into the game and so on. It's going to be prohibitively expensive, right? And you will have to farm a lot of resources and so on to get that. But then if you have it, it solves a lot of your kind of like storage, housing, etc. issues, and it's just fucking cool, right? Some people actually have found some of it, sadly. It's not, because it's not set dressed yet, right? It's not looking like, and it's not structured exactly like yet how it will be, but it'll be massively cool.
And GHAZZY, you got any last questions or anything you want to ask here? We're kind of getting towards the end of it.
I'm just curious. I don't want to take up too much time on our podcast about minion stuff, but it was teased.
He is the minion
So I'm
guy.
just curious if you have any timeline or anything for the possibility of a minion class, because that to me that got me erect.
So yeah, here's what I did. So that was again during this holiday session, right? Like it'll be interesting to see what I do next holiday session. But this holiday session kind of like also was, hey, I want to try a necro build and see what would that actually feel like in our game, because that's never been done in a Souls game, for example, right? You're never able to cast minions in that way. They had like summons, obviously, right, and that kind of thing. But I want to see what that would feel like, and I was kind of like surprised by, like, I just did it, I implemented it. It was like, shit, that could totally work, right? And so I did I did the thing where it's like, hey, you can just summon generic enemies, right? And then also I did the revive thing that you have in Diablo 2, right? Where it's like, no, you can actually revive the thing that you just killed, right? Because that always creates these really cool moments of like, oh my God, I just killed this giant. You know what? I'm going to revive that giant, right? And now he's going to run with me and like he's smashing things. And then the other thing I did was Possess, for example, right? Where I don't know if you guys played PlayStation 1 games a lot, but I always loved that experience in the Ape games, right? Ape's Odyssey and Ape's Exodus, where you could actually take over that enemy, right? So I have a rune where it's like, hey, if you kill the enemy with that rune, like you drain that enemy, and then if you kill them with that rune, you actually take them over. And so then now you're controlling, like your character basically becomes passive. The camera pans over to that enemy, and now you're actually playing that enemy. And it uses your stats basically, right? Like it uses your health bar and so on. And then I just jumped on the Discord and kind of like wanted to know from our folks kind of like, hey, what is the really cool stuff that's been done with Necromancer so far? And I got a whole bunch of feedback on here's where Necros are in terms of ARPGs, right? Because all of these things that are out there, like I can't know everything, right? And here's where that is, right? So I'm looking at just, okay, what can we do there? But this is not for 1.0, right? Like this is me still playing around with it and doing some crazy stuff. But for 1.0, we already have our class list defined. So we're kind of like going through that right now. And then I just like really just want to take a look at what has been done with Necromancer so far and how can we improve upon that experience? What are the things that we can do that make it even better? Let me ask you, right? Like if you're such a fan of minions and so on, what would you like to see? Because the general thing that I'm hearing is that nobody likes fucking temporary minions, right? And I mean very much in that camp, right? I do not like the current necro experience in like a Diablo 3 and 4 and so on, right? I want to build that fucking massive army. But yeah, what would you like to see?
I mean, it kind of depends. That like people talk about summoner versus summoner. You have things like Final Fantasy Summoner is, or Lost Ark, for example, is summoner where you basically cast a spell that deals damage, but thematically or visually, it's a summon that does the damage for you. I absolutely personally hate those things. Like when I talk about summoner or necromancer in a traditional ARPG sense, I'm expecting to control an army of minions that is doing the fighting for me. And my job as a summoner is more about the utility stuff, keeping them alive, buffing them, debuffing the enemies, staying alive, and doing those things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree
That's the
more.
kind of traditional gameplay of a necromancer / summoner that I would want to see in games. That's the kind of gameplay approach that I like the most to play in most games.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, that's how I built the early prototypes already, right? Because that gives me that feeling of like, there's something really satisfying about that cookie clicker thing, right? Of like, I made these guys and I watched them go and now they kill shit for me, right? And it's almost like that XCOM thing, right? Of like, and I have to keep them alive, right? Like, oh my God, I have these 3 really powerful skeletons already, and I'm just buffing them and I'm healing them and so on, right? That's what I would like to see as well. I don't like that thing where it's like like the things have basically become spells. I think that really takes away from that feeling of like
you're just a caster DPSer with extra steps.
Yes. Yes. I completely agree. So
yeah.
that's the direction that we would be heading into. But I want to take it to that next level. I want to always figure out what is the next level that we can do there. To some degree, some of that I'm already seeing because, well, we're not point and click, right? And some, like, we can do some really cool stuff with just that. But we'll see. I think the possess stuff is really interesting. I want to, like, look into more things because I think there's more that could be done there.
All right. Well, with that, I think we are at the end here. So, Thomas, if you have any last topics you want to cover or a question you want to ask us, for instance, you get the last word.
No, I think it would just be like I'm constantly on our Discord. I read a lot. I often jump in and just like chat with people and so on, right? So if people want to give their feedback, if people have some ideas for Wicked and so on, right? We are always listening, right? Like we are very much building Wicked in a way that I think is a really good development approach where we picked early access and now we are building it with the community in a way where it's like, hey, they're telling us their feedback. We are then the ones that obviously have to shape things in that direction, right? A lot of times we say, hey, we like this, we don't like that. But I think the community that we built there is already really cool. Like I loved seeing when Together happened, right? How many kind of like groups of people were just there and like played together, right? And then started trading with one another and helped new players out just playing the game and so on. So yeah, just if you're interested in Wicked, right, hop onto our Discord and spread your feedback and we'll listen.
All right. Well, thank you, Thomas, for taking the time to do the chat. No Rest for the Wicked Together update is available. You can get it on Steam, and congratulations one more time on a new peak concurrent launch with the update. That's pretty cool to see, actually. So till next time, this is Tavern Talk over.
Thank you, folks.
Recording completed. All right, we're all done. Recording's done. Stream's still live, though. And yeah, thanks, Tom. You got a new office, by the way? Is that a new office? Like the background's different.
Yeah, I built an office out in my house to kind of like be able to spend more time with my family because the other office that I had was away from my family, right? So that kind of sucked. So now I'm in a different space most of the time.
Yeah, it looks good, man.
Nice.
All right,
guys, this was a lot of fun. Happy to do this again, right? Like if you guys, like if we have another update and you guys want to jump into it again, right? I'm always happy to kind of like just talk about No Rest for the Wicked or future stuff. And if you guys have any other feedback, right? If you get to play or something, right? And if there's things that you want to see, always just send feedback our way, right? Like I love this whole thing of like what we have going on right now with the community and with people. Like there's lots of streamers that constantly, like Riker constantly sets us ideas of like, hey, what about this and so on, right? And like I would like to see something like that. And
speaking of
ultimately the goal is we want to build the coolest ARPG ever made, right? So if you guys have ideas or thoughts or something, send them our way.
I was just gonna say, speaking of streamers, like the amount of people that I talked to that really enjoyed this update for whatever reason, it's like we were talking in the beginning, like trying to put your thumb on the post of why this one was so well received or for whatever reason. But the amount of people that have actually been like saying they really enjoyed playing through. Like I had a hell of a lot of fun playing with Riker, a hell of a lot of fun playing with Carms. A lot of people stream the game like more so than normal, beyond the normal hashtag ad stuff. Like people are actually like sticking with the game and playing a lot. So it's been pretty cool to see. The sentiment's been like very positive.
Very much so.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap up.
I'm just super excited about the summoner stuff personally. So it's like, let me have hands on it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, guys, if you didn't know, GHAZZY's like the minion guy. Like he's the main minion guy for like.
We will definitely test some stuff in PTR, right? So if you want to join the PTR thing, just add me on Discord and I'll get you hooked up.
Sounds good.
Darth has me on Discord anyway. You can just share the contact.
Yeah, we're in the same chat now. He can add you there too. So be a lookout for the ad there.
Already done.
Cool.
All right, I'm gonna wrap it here, boys. Thanks so much again, Thomas. Good chatting with you too, GHAZZY.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Thanks for joining.
Till next time. Cheers.
I hope I'm not getting too much shit from shit talking, but I usually do.
Well, I mean, like,
it's funny because I try my best to not swear too much on the Tavern Talk because I swear a lot normally when I'm on my own stream. And I feel like I could have let loose on that lid a little bit in this one. I got a message from one of my mods. He's like, oh man, this guy swears just as much as you do. I'm like, yeah, I love this guy.
There is some good.
I'm
Go on.
I'm Austrian. I learned English a lot by just watching Hollywood films, right? And I think I just fucked up my language by all the swearing that you have in these films, right? But I have some of these speech defects where I just say right a lot or ultimately or that kind of thing, right? And fuck or fucking. I don't know. At least I learned the language.
Everyone's got their own thing, but yeah, if anything, I think it makes it seem like it's authentic. I don't think there's think there's a single person that thinks there's any fake persona about you from that. So, you get
Luckily,
that.
we don't have to be that, right? There is no publisher in the background or anything, right? Or a PR person in the background who tells us the script or something, right? We can just be gamers and talk the way we want to talk. Because I'm not envying a lot of other developers where it's just where you get that, right? Where it's just so stifled. And I don't enjoy you guys interviewing that either, right? Because you always get that kind of really weird PR thing, where it's almost awkward the way they can respond to stuff. It's just weird.
You find, since we're on the topic, I'm curious, you find being so honestly vocal about the way you feel about things, do you feel like that has any effect and backlash at all? Do you regret at any points how vocal you are about it, or do you think it's no, this is the way it should be, I'm going to speak my mind, what comes with it comes with it?
Yeah, I just don't care anymore. I already was on the thing where people try to cancel me many times, right, for this and that, or me speaking my mind. I don't care. I just want to make good games, right? And if people enjoy my games, that's great, and if people get really offended by me, I'm sorry, but my games are still good, just ignore me.
All right, fair enough. I was curious. I had to ask. Sometimes I read the Twitter and I'm like, God damn, dude! He's popping off. All right. I know, guys. He's got to get to, I think, a WoW raid or something, and I am going.
No, I gotta eat some food first.
Okay. We're off to play WoW. You don't play WoW, do you, Thomas? Because we have about a bajillion hours of WoW we have to play before the raids kick off.
I used to, but I dropped out after Burning Crusade or something.
Yeah, that's where we're at right now.
You can run it back right now.
Yeah,
TVC launched a week ago.
Yep. That's what we're all doing. We're no lifing Burning Crusade.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think MMORPGs are my thing anymore, and I would probably just fucking not get any work done anymore if I'd actually get into it.
True.
Oh, we are well aware.
Yeah, true, dude. All right,
folks. Then, yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you, folks. And if you need anything, right, you have me on Discord.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for joining again. Have a good one.
Awesome.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.